Unification work session and meeting on October 12th, 2022 at about 6:01. We will stand with the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item on the agenda is approval of the agenda, but we have two modifications to the agenda. We would like to table item 8B at this point. The district climate update, Jen is unable to come to the meeting. Will definitely be on the agenda for our next meeting. And also, I would like to add under 9B, which is new business. That one first. Why don't we make that one first? You want to do it separate? Or just do it together? Yeah. We can do it together. Yeah. I just wanted to add a finance committee appointment. So I need a motion to approve the agenda as amended. Where are we adding appointments? The appointment's going to be under 9B. I will make that motion as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Okay, good. We're going to begin our work session, item number 3, with our strategic plan update.
Thank you, Lucy. Thanks for everyone who's here with us this evening in person or perhaps watching at home. I've been trying to give some strategic plan updates during the regular board meetings, but in talking to the board officers and the staff, it feels like we're at a stage where this work session format lends itself to having a little bit more of a robust discussion. And I want to make sure you know that we talked as a staff about dividing up this presentation. And then I think the practicality of it, they said, Doug, you just do it. And so, but a lot of our staff are here and they can come into the conversation when we get into the discussion. Because certainly a lot of folks, not even here, have been involved in the creation of where we are at this point, going back almost 18 months now. So the 4 things that I've kind of broken down for tonight, the main thing is the very first bullet. We want to give you some very brief updates on the action plans. I say brief because we could probably spend the whole hour at each one if we went in depth. That time is not available tonight. We also want to talk about a draft of a measurable outcome kind of concept, certainly not finished at this point, but we think that's important. Some other reimagining updates, which shouldn't take long. And then at the end, if time permits, kind of want to know how you want us to come back to you with future updates about pieces of the plan as it evolves. So let me just kind of give some reminders, things we've talked about before, but I think they help kind of ground the discussion. So we've got in the adopted plan 6 strategies, and each of those plans, or each of those strategies has an action plan that's in development that supports it. And the best way I like to think about this is it's how you take the written strategy and those descriptions that we approved and actually put some tangible actions about what do we need to do to operationalize this. Now, the teams actually began meeting back in March, even before the board adopted the plan. Those that were on the board may recall, we kind of talked about a draft of the plan at our January retreat. And at that time, the marching orders were start working because this kind of looks like it's going to work. But we didn't get that formal approval from this body until June. And I think an important kind of point in time for this process was these teams are working in isolation from each other, and some of you are part of those teams. But there wasn't an opportunity to really get all the teams together. So when our leadership team met this summer, we decided to reach out and offer any member of any action team that was available and interested to spend July 11th with us, and also July 12th, if they could, on the measurable outcomes. And so we did that. And so some of you got an opportunity to hear some of what I'm going to present tonight because it was shared there. And I think it's just important to bring everybody up to speed as much as possible. I also think it's important, and this is not just a plea to our public or to any of you, but these action teams are open to anybody in the community that's been through one of our gatherings, which we've done, I think, 9 or 10 at this point, where we kind of ground people in the work. And we're constantly accepting new members, and sometimes people drop off for whatever reason. So if you hear folks that say they want to get involved, they can be, and we would welcome that. We also, I think, talked about, maybe at our last meeting or the meeting before, Bob had mentioned something that I think we all struggle with, that it's important to have our young learners involved in the process, but they're busy people. And getting them to meet when we even have trouble sometime engaging the adults in our community in their volunteer time has been problematic. So we are developing a way to engage our young learners during the school day that doesn't also conflict with what they're in school to do primarily. So that's in the works. I think it's also important to state that these 6 strategies are all, to a small or larger extent, dependent on each other. So that's another reason why it's important to get together and talk about this. Now, as a leadership team, we talk about this every week. It's a standing agenda item in our leadership team meetings, updates from the action team. So we inform each other, but there's a broader audience that needs to be brought up to speed from time to time. And I think the last bullet is a really important one. The action plans themselves are working documents. And so we're going to put dates on them anytime we publish them, because what is true today might change in a couple of weeks as we learn more information, as we do more research, as we're doing site visits, and as we're kind of getting updated about what we may be able to do going forward. So again, I mentioned the brevity of our time. What I'd like to do, if it's okay, and I think this is the only way we're going to get through these, is if you kind of let me give the brief overview of all 6, then we'll pause and ask for board member questions, concerns, comments, bring staff into it if there is time for that. And how we bring this back to you is actually at the end of the slide deck. So if we can hold off on that, that would be great. So the first action plan is related to the strategy that learners progress through a personalized, competency-based education system. And I think it's fair to say, some people consider this the kind of meat and potatoes of the entire plan. When you think about it, if you've been through the Reimagining Education, and even if you haven't, some of the stuff that seems maybe kind of transformational and difficult to envision because it's so different, a lot of it is in this action plan. And so as a result, most of the other plans are queuing off this one. And that team has been working for a while, and they've been working hard. And one of the realities of that team specifically is that this action plan is going to look very different for different ages and stages of development of our learners. So some of you who went through the reimagining way back at the outset when we were in the full day sessions or even the Zoom sessions, if you went through either of those, you'll recall that we did some design work around age spans. And we divided those kind of design teams into kind of arbitrarily ages 3 to 8, 9 to 12, 13 to 15, and 16 plus. And we labeled those, for lack of a better label, young adult, adolescent, young, and youngest. So not too creative there, but it kind of worked. And so that team has figured out that really for them to kind of move forward in this design work, they need to subdivide. So we kind of sit here where they haven't technically divided yet. Maybe they haven't. Someone can update on me that in a minute, but that's how they're going to move forward. And I really think that's going to be helpful, because as much as it's important to have these conversations as a large action team, and again, this is the largest team, when you start thinking about some of these things for 7-year-olds versus like 16-year-olds, they're very different. And it is important to make these things kind of age and developmentally appropriate. And there's also a lot of work. There's no way one committee, we believe, could do all of that work and do it well. Thankfully, it is a large committee, so we think we can divide it up nicely into those 4 segments. But so when you look at the action plans, if you've had a chance to look at them, there's a lot of repetition, because a lot of what we're doing is common to the age spans, but it will be operationalized differently. But I want to highlight some of the things that are common to all of those age spans. The first, and these are not necessarily in order, but I think they're important. If we're going to ask staff to facilitate this learning in a very different way, we have to make a concerted effort into training them and making them feel comfortable in doing that. Another piece to this strategy is if learners are to be able to navigate their own learning pathways and journeys throughout their educational career with us, we don't know any way to do this, and we haven't seen the other way to do this practically that doesn't have some type of digital interface for our learners that tracks their progress, allows their parents to track their progress, their teachers to put inputs, but most importantly for themselves as learners to kind of see themselves progressing through a competency-based system. Another big part of this, and it's been happening, it's going to continue to happen, is we've got to see what other work exists in this space. Like, I don't think any of us feel like, as talented as our team is and our district is and our community is, to really start from zero on this work, I think would be pretty intimidating for all of us. But thankfully, there's work going on around the country and in various circles. So we're gonna learn from those folks and kind of build on their work. And there's actually some states, Connecticut's not one of them, but there are a handful of states who have state level frameworks around this work. And they're really great free resources that we can use to start building ours out. And that kind of transitions to the fourth bullet, which is we have the 4 domains. And I'll just remind you, academics, employability, citizenship, and wellness. And for each of those age spans and for each of our learners at different levels, we're going to have competencies, well-defined competencies in each of those areas. So this is not something that's going to happen overnight. And I know sometimes we have people out there who say, it seems to me, by the way, that we have people in 2 camps. Either why hasn't this happened already? Or how could we possibly get this done anytime soon? And I think, you know, we need to find the sweet spot so that we're moving towards this, but we're not going too fast that we leave people behind or we're not doing it well. But we're also not putting a 5 to 10 year horizon on this, because I think people are going to lose energy and interest, and half of our learners will be not with us anymore at that point. So that's kind of where we sit there. And then the last one, again, this will get tricky and we don't have anything to really say about this tonight. But if this all works well, we are going to have to do serious business with our school calendars and our kind of schedule of how learning happens at different levels. So stay tuned for that fun discussion when it happens. Then I think it's important to highlight a few things that are really kind of unique to the adolescent and young adult groups. It's been very clear in every session we've had, as people like the concept, to make sure that anything we're doing lines up with state graduation requirements. We feel like we're in a good place to do that, but it's important for us to actually put the steps behind that to make sure that it's true, because no one is going to adopt any of this if that isn't true. The second one is also true. You know, all of our learners don't go to college, but many of them do aspire to do that. And so a lot of the questions we get are, could a competency-based system specifically for our oldest learners, is that going to in any way impact their ability to get admitted into school? Again, the good news on this is the top colleges in the United States, including many in the Ivy League, not only accept competency-based transcripts, in many ways they prefer them because they actually say what learners can do instead of just a GPA or some of these things that have traditionally been accepted. And that's based on their own experience with how learners do when they actually get to college. And then another one that we think is important is going to our local businesses here in our 2 towns and our surrounding areas and building in competencies that specifically tie to what they want employees to be able to do on the job, or maybe what they don't see them able to do currently. We get that from time to time. Maybe you all do too. So that was a very quick run through the first strategy. That's the longest one, I promise. The second one is that learners leverage local and global resources to promote experiential learning. Now, this one, we think, I mentioned that many of them tie off the first strategy. This one will likely, they haven't formally done it, but I think it will also likely be subdivided to those age spans, because again, when we think about going out and doing things in the community and some of the things that are in this plan, again, looks very different for the different ages. We have safety and security concerns. level of independence. And on the flip side, our older learners are very independent. Many of them drive, have jobs, vote, will be eligible to serve in the military, a lot of those things that we associate with adulthood. So on that, end of the spectrum, we want to support a lot more of this than we currently do. And as a result, most of the actions in this plan focus on that young adult and adolescent group. That doesn't mean we're ignoring the younger learners. It's just a lot of what we envision in this strategy involves leaving campus and going out into the community. So the elements here, which probably should not surprise you, and hopefully everyone can kind of get behind, it kind of starts with work-based learning, putting a much more deliberate emphasis on our learners getting out into job shadows, internships, apprenticeships, things that give them authentic work experience while they are still with us and tethered to the K-12 education system. And that's more of kind of the physical side of this. There's also the virtual side of this, which can include global partnerships, which we've had here in this district before, but thinking about, expanding those and really leveraging the digital world that allows greater global connection, again, which our learners are going to need when they go out into the world. And then the last one I'll mention is we think there's a real opportunity here to do a lot more than we're currently doing in terms of earning workplace credentials, which are becoming much and much more important for employability in this day and age, and college credits prior to graduation. And there is some intersection there. I'm sure many of you know, depending on your age, a lot of what used to be considered when I was growing up kind of in the trade school space is now in the community college space. Community colleges have done a wonderful job in Connecticut and other places, kind of bringing a lot of what we used to consider trades onto their campuses. And so there you can earn college credit while also earning a workplace credential. And we'd like to have a lot more of our learners engaged in those opportunities. The third one is learners are supported by learning coaches and connection teams. So like we said with the first one, a lot of professional learning around this. We think some of our staff may be able to jump right in and do this work kind of naturally. Maybe that's how they've always operated as educators. Others are going to need more support, and not just prior to doing this work, but also while they're doing it, to be kind of coached and supported through that. Another thing that we feel like is really important is we've put out these terms, learning coach, connection team, and people are saying, can we define that a little bit better? Even more so than what's in the descriptions that we drafted and that you all approved. And I really think there are going to be opportunities to do what's in the fourth bullet, which is to implement pieces of this, even before we may have shifted the whole system to go competency-based for some of the more really transformative items here. And like I said, with some of the others, another big piece of this strategy is to research what's out there. There are a lot of folks doing good work in this space, and we would be fools not to kind of understand what they're doing. A lot of times these folks will tell you, if we had to start it over again, this is how we would start it. And so if you're kind of starting from scratch, this is what we would like, we would recommend that you would do in that space. The next one is that learners are supported by a community that embraces learner-centered education. This is our communication advocacy strategy. And there's a lot of different ways that this one can go. By the way, this is, I'm not putting a pitch in there for Samantha because she's the facilitator, but this is the one that has the fewest number of people actually on it. So if anyone's looking for a place to land and hasn't yet, we would welcome you into that group. But one of the things we need to do, and we've been reminded of this as recently as the last few weeks, is we need to cultivate advocacy within key employee groups. Top of that list would be our teachers. If teachers do not believe that this is what's best for our learners, and if they don't feel ownership in this design process, I don't think this work is going anywhere. And so this is an invitation and trying to help folks understand where we're trying to go. And now that we've kind of put folks through the mandatory reimaginings, which we did in August and September, we're hearing, hey, thanks for telling us that, but now we're kind of scared a little bit of what things you're talking about. They sound so different. So part of this strategy is going to be to follow up with those folks at the school levels, through faculty meetings, small group meetings, whatever we need to do, one-on-one meetings, to really help folks kind of get a better handle of this, but also to let them know they're part of the design, that this isn't something that we're just going to hand to them and say, do it, like something we buy off the shelf. They really need to be part of it if this is going to be effective for our learners. For lack of a better phrase, we've created this reimagining light. So we did the full day sessions, we did the half day sessions, and we can keep doing some of those, but we're still hearing there are people who really would like to learn more and do more, but they're not going to give us 3 hours. That might even include some of you all. And so we're in the process of developing, I don't want to put a time on it, but maybe like 45 minutes, an hour, something that we could possibly do at a PTA, PTO type meeting, at a community-based meeting for anyone that would want us to be there. We don't want to force our way in anywhere, but as people are interested, I think it's important that we do that. Now, those of you that went through the full day and then the half day, you know that there was some stuff that got cut out. And I actually think some of the anxiety we're feeling from some of the school folks is that they didn't have the benefit of that full day kind of experience, but we didn't really have the time to do that. And so when we go light, that's going to be an even smaller kind of dip your toe in the shallow end, but we still think that's important so that we can grab up more individuals who haven't heard about this yet or just don't have the time to do that. And the key will be, if you've been through our processes, it needs to be a conversation where they're not just listening to us, but we're listening to them and they're talking to each other. That's really key to any type of design process like we're entering into. And so we may not get it right out of the gate, but this is something that we are working on. I mentioned before, again, it's been suggested at a previous board meeting, but we're actively trying to build in a process that would allow us during the school day, probably starting at the high school, probably leveraging our existing advisory because it just kind of works in the schedule, to maybe run some of these action plans by some of these learners so that they're not choosing between us and cross-country or band or homework, because we know what they're going to choose. And we don't want them to choose us over any of those things, because that takes away from their lived experience as learners. Having said all that, if they've got time and they're willing to engage us, we're going to try to engage them. And many of them have said that they would wish to do that. Many of whom have been through our processes and just can't find the time to meet with us on these action teams. We also talked about a concept, and again, these are all just draft concepts at this point, that, and I mentioned this before, but I think it bears repeating. One of the things that I firmly believe is that, okay, I can stand up in front of an audience, or any of us can, 60, 70, 80 people. We can make videos, we can make brochures, we can do whatever you want. This work is so different that it's really helpful if we can engage people in one-on-one conversations. And that's actually part of this strategy. But I can't do it all myself. And the staff jokes that I just do this naturally. Some of you, that's how you even got involved in this work, as we started talking. I'm like, hey, you want to be part of some work that we're talking about? But there's actually a way to train folks to have these conversations, to share information, but also to listen to people. People need to be heard in this space. And if they have, whether they support this work or whether they have concerns about it, there's a way that we can train folks to do this. So we've kind of created this term, learner-centered ambassadors, and you know, those will be all volunteers. So, you know, maybe there will only be 3 of us when it's all said and done, but we'll start with whoever we have, and we will try to do that and make sure that those folks are available also for folks who don't want to come to Reimagining Light, or don't want to come to a Board of Ed meeting, or don't want to watch. They just want to talk to someone about this, and we are committed to that. And then the last piece is a marketing piece, and doing some marketing around this work. And this one is really difficult because I think at this moment, we don't really have anything to market. All we're really kind of talking about right now is kind of the philosophical underpinnings and some of what we're starting. But we feel like as soon as we start even going a little bit into this work, there will be an opportunity to capture some of that work in various ways and to market this work. And you know, when we first started working on this with the board, there seemed to be a desire to long term to market this as maybe something that distinguishes RSD13 from other places as we're marketing to potential people that would move into the community. And maybe even to some of our existing families who are considering other options than our public schools, perhaps because they perceive some of this innovative work is going on in the private school space or in the, homeschool, charter school, all of those spaces. I don't think we need to apologize for wanting to provide that for our learners and to try to bring some of those folks back if that would do that for them. And so two more here. Learners are supported, I think it's two more, by educators who engage in personalized, relevant, and job-embedded professional learning. This one may be the very first one we can launch on in a substantial way. And it seems to be something that resounds with a lot of our teachers, maybe not all of them, but many of those that we've had conversations with and who were part of our design teams feel like even if the other work doesn't start immediately, this would be a great place to start. And so part of it has to do with us rethinking professional learning as something that is historically, and not just here, it's been true of every district I've worked in, as almost like a compliance contractual obligation. I have to do so many days or hours. My principal, my superintendent, director of whoever, whatever tells me on this day, you go here and you sit through this training on this day at this time. We really want to make this shift to where our teachers and our other staff feel like it is their plan for their own professional learning and growth, that they would take some ownership and some individual accountability, and the role of the district would shift to guiding and supporting them in that individual journey. And again, that's a long way from where we are at the moment. But in order to do that, we've got a lot of structures that we're going to have to rethink. And we also think, similar to what we said with the competency base, we're going to have some type of online or digital tool, we believe, to archive, track, support, and make sure that there is accountability for this work along with the flexibility. And also, it would just streamline a lot of things. Like sometimes somebody wants to go to something and it costs money, and it would kind of smooth out that process, which is currently kind of a paper and pencil process, and also help people share ideas. And I think something else to point out while we're in this space is if you've not been a teacher or an educator and you don't know how we do professional learning, this might be easier for you to get your brain around than if you've been in education a long time. But a lot of times when we think professional learning, we think about big keynote speakers, we think about experts, consultants, even our own people that do like Linda, that do like large group. You don't do that, yeah, I know. That do large group or small group, trainings for folks, and that will certainly always be a part of what we do. But I consider professional learning walk into the classroom next door and being given some time to observe your colleague doing something well that you would like to come back and do, or maybe a colleague in another school or another district, or even remotely connecting and developing formal and informal kind of networks, so that it isn't always your principal or other administrators saying, you need to go there and do this, you need to go there and do this. You take ownership for that. And I want to tell you, we've done a little bit of this last June and even this fall, and some of our teachers are running with this. And it is so cool to see when they take the initiative and they feel like they have that freedom and flexibility. And then, as we said, with the competency base, we really have to rethink our calendars, starting with 23-24, which we'll probably be talking about like in January or something like that. And we may not get there all in 1 year, but the current calendar says this is a PD day. This is a PD day. And so kind of by publishing that and saying that, we're almost conveying to our staff and to our community that we're putting professional learning in the boxes, the discrete time boxes. And we all know that doesn't happen. Sometimes the things you want to do happen on days other than that. And we just haven't, as a system, been real flexible with that historically. And we need to work on that. And then the last one, and this again is the one that did not come out of the design work, because it's the behind the scenes work. It's that learners are supported by efficient operational practices. And the reason I think this one maybe shouldn't be last, maybe it should be first, is if this isn't happening, none of that other stuff is going to happen. So we've got bargaining agreements with employees. Many of the things that I've mentioned are tethered to a time-based system and things that have historically been in those agreements. It's important that we try to infuse some of this into that to the extent possible and get buy-in from our bargaining units. Otherwise, a lot of this other stuff, it probably just isn't going to happen, or it's not going to happen well. We've also talked about our transportation contract. You know, right now, that's all set on the current system where everyone comes to school at the same time and everyone leaves at the same time. Well, if we've got young adult and adolescent learners out in the community more frequently, we may need to transport some of them to some of these job sites or project-based sites, and we may have all kinds of other things going on. So we need to look at that. I don't need to really probably hit on the third bullet because it's on our agenda and we had a whole work session on it a couple of weeks ago, but we really feel like in this action plan that reconfiguring our school facility use is going to support this work going forward in a significant way. We also need to recognize that many of the things I've mentioned have a technology component to them, and we need to make sure that our current technology infrastructure, as well as software and data warehousing and a lot of things that I don't even know what they mean, but they're on this slide because Ken told me to say them, you know, that they are able to support all of the things that we've talked about. Otherwise, again, we'll come up with these great plans and the technology won't be there to support that. And I probably shouldn't have even put this last one last, but our annual budget process needs to reflect this work moving forward. And that will probably happen in stages. I don't know that in this first year of planning, of significant planning, that we will get there. But, you know, we got some criticism in last year's budget about, oh, the district is talking about learner-centered education and reimagining, but you kind of just approved a traditional budget. And you know, I'm going to own that to say our plan wasn't adopted yet. We weren't where we were with these action plans yet. So for those folks, I believe that is coming, but it's important to do that alignment, or we're not going to be able to, you know, get anywhere. And I think I also take this opportunity to remind everyone that our budget failed out of the gate last year. So the message here is not we need to increase our budget dramatically to do this work, but we need to be wise and efficient and strategic in maybe shifting budget priorities to support this work. And that'll play out through the budget process, and it will key off these action plans. So again, they're not all fully vetted, but ideally, all of them are going to start having that dollar column, whether it's cost or savings, really populated with real data so we can do that intelligently. So it's like half an hour, and I'm sorry, I was going as fast as I could. Let me pause. See what comments or questions we have from board members and staff. This is the point where if they've got questions, I may just ask one of you to jump in if you feel comfortable doing that.
It seems to me that one of the things that we probably have to get to the learners, what is a competency-based transcript look like? You know, how does that actually get in their hand, and what does it mean? And are there colleges, can we get college people come in and say, this is what we like to see? I think that would help bring along people if they kind of saw what a competency-based transcript looked like.
No, I think that's good. And that may already be in the action plan, but if it's not, we'll make sure to add it. I'm kind of looking at the folks back there that work with that.
I can speak a little.
Can you? Yeah,
to
go
some of
ahead.
that. So after some of our site visits, we did learn that there are some schools that have specific individuals that actually take the coursework that the high schoolers do and they transfer them to GPA credit so that they do have something on their transcript. But one thing that we have been talking about is reaching out to these schools to see what are some of the colleges and universities that have accepted some of these learners, and to get a hold of them to kind of ask them some questions in terms of what they look for. So to really kind of reach at the top and start there with those conversations.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Bob, too, and again, I'm not prejudging where we may go with this, but some of the shift may have to be grandfathered in. So I don't know that, you know, I think to say to like a rising senior that they would shift to this in their senior year while they're applying to college, I've not seen that happen anywhere. I'm not saying that means we have to start in ninth grade but we have to do this intelligently. So I think it's a really good point. And I think until we can convince people of that, we're not comfortable moving significantly into this space.
I'm just curious about the process that's going to happen to define the competencies in those domains. I think it's kind of easy to do the academic piece because it's what we do, but to come up with a definition, and maybe this is for the next part about measurable outcomes, but to come up with a definition of wellness, citizenship, and employability, it's so subjective. This
Yeah,
can be hard.
I think, and others can jump in there too, but here we are also going to depend on other places that have kind of paved this pathway. And you're right, there's some subjectivity in any of it. Even in the academic space, there's subjectivity. I think everyone's trying to do this now in some way because there's a disconnect between what our graduates, I don't mean ours RSD13, but kind of like public education in general, maybe even private education, is kind of producing in the academic sphere and the skills that employers kind of value. And so lots of people are trying to get at that in different ways. I think what I like about our approach is that we will, ideally, if we can get this all done, wield those competencies throughout a learner's journey. And so instead of just focusing on employability when they turn 16, 17, or 18, there will be pieces of that that can be built throughout their experience. And yeah, it will be subjective in that sense. That's why we have action teams working on this. And that's why we're going to bring things back to you, because we want this to be grounded in the research and the data. So I mentioned employability because we're going to go to employers to make sure that we're validating and to places like Indeed and the places that do major hiring, because the one thing I want to make sure everybody understands is one of my pet peeves in education is that we sometimes try to separate our learners into career bound or college bound. And I'm very troubled by that because my opinion is we're preparing everyone for work. Work is in everybody's future. At least we're trying to make that. Some jobs require more formal education and training than others, or different types. And so one of the things I've learned over the years is that the same skills that employers tell us generally make people successful on the job is what college people tell us generally makes them successful at college. So they're not necessarily two separate skills. I think when we get into wellness and citizenship, it's going to get very subjective for some people. And we're just going to have to try to come to consensus on something like that. You know, I personally feel like voting in elections and being civically engaged in your community is a measure of citizenship. Somebody else might argue with me and say, no, that's not being a good citizen. A good citizen is helping your neighbor out when they're in trouble. So, I mean, I think more discussion to come on that. But I don't think that makes us avoid the conversation, because unless we feel like citizenship and wellness and employability are not really important for our learners to be successful when they leave us, I think we need to try our best in that space. And before we lose the academic piece, what we struggle with academically, I think, in this work is that we tend to do things in content area silos, whereas this is the English. And when you see this work really done well in other places, the learners don't view it as them as being necessarily separate subjects. They look at, I'm going to do a project that I'm interested in about this, and I'm going to pick these English competencies and these math competencies. And so if you can envision that, we're going to have to do some professional learning and some real thinking about how would that actually look and how could we support that at all levels. But it's a great question. Does anyone want to add anything to that? I'm sorry, I'm talking too much. I apologize. Good question, Linda.
So since we're starting teachers negotiations in a 3-year contract, we need to be able to figure out how we want to engage with the teachers in this process,
Yes.
in that process.
Well, that was gonna be one of my questions. How does it affect that?
Well, I have been told, since this is my first time through this, that I'm not to really say anything about that specifically in this setting, given the way the process works. But I can tell you that Craig and I have been talking about this going back a number of months without getting to specific language. And those of you that are on the negotiating team will see specific language that becomes in our first proposal that we would propose to the team to consider. And that may or may not make it in our first proposal to the teacher bargaining unit. But we will show you some very specific ways that we think we can enter into that. And I think the other piece of that is hopefully having an understanding with that bargaining unit that we don't want to wait 3 more years perhaps, and knowing that this process is iterative, and them being open to revisiting pieces of it as the work gets developed. Those are really good questions.
I have just a clarification. The reimagining light, is that geared towards marketing to the general community outside of the education community?
I think, would that be the answer, Samantha? I mean, our licensed staff have all now been through the required sessions.
Yes, so we originally had said, you know, everyone that works primarily with students, we thought was really important to go through sort of a larger session. But now we're talking about the community at large. So anyone who would be interested, anyone who, you know, sort of lives here and wants more information that isn't necessarily like sitting at this meeting, but might be in other spaces, where can we go and sort of share the work?
You're talking about people who are interested. There are some people that aren't really sure what it's all about. And, you know, I'm thinking more if you're reaching out to the community that it's, you know, just a general FYI or several short FYI types of sessions so that the community is aware of and understands what is going on, whether they're parents or whether they're not at the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think what would really, where we feel like this would work the best, and I may or may have not said this, is when there's an existing group, even if it's not like a formal group, could be a bunch of people that, you know, hang out at a particular restaurant at a certain time during the week. If they're interested in us coming in, that's a much better setting than us trying to insert ourselves where they don't even really want us there. And so I think that's where we actually need everybody's help in helping identify who those groups may be, and if there's leaders of those groups, because we would like to go where we're welcomed. And that doesn't mean people will welcome the message that we give, but they at least want to sit down and have an interest with that. We feel like there's probably a lot of settings like that in this community, and we need to develop this kind of, what are we thinking, like 45 minutes? We haven't really, you know, mentioned it out. The other thing about that is, and I mentioned this before too, it can't always be me having this conversation. And so we're going to have teams that can go out and do this work, because if this work is only associated with me, then the work is not valid. It's got to be something that many of us could engage folks in.
Any other questions?
Yeah, who's comprised of the team that goes on the site visits?
That's not a set team per se. We've done a few site visits already, and with each one of those, we try to determine what that setting is and which action plans are primarily involved in that. We also look at like people's availability. There are some of our like employees that it's easier for them to go than to others. And you know, the site visit is a two-pronged thing. There's the site visit itself. Part of it is actually trying to determine if that site is actually something meaningful that would help us. Now, we have others guiding us from, you know, other settings and contacts that we've had. But until you actually go somewhere, you don't actually know how fruitful, so to speak. And that's not a judgment, because if you recall, we're not trying to replicate what somebody else is doing. We're trying to see what they're doing and seeing how that might work here. So yeah, there's no kind of set format to that.
Are there teachers that go?
We have had teachers that have gone, yes. Yeah, and that's an important group to really get there. Also is incidentally, because of our lack of substitutes, a group that if many of them are sent at the same time, kind of degrades what we're doing currently in supporting what we're trying to do in the future. So, I mean, one thing that was kind of cool was we had 2 different groups of teachers on their own initiate site visits on our PD day on September the 26th, and had some really good visits and some really good feedback. So that was really cool. That's what I'm saying. Like, we didn't plan those. They just came to us and said, hey, can we go do this? And we're like, sure. So, yeah,
I was gonna hold off until I think it's towards the end for a goal anyway, but to piggyback what you're saying, I've had a few people ask me that, and that seems to be a concern. And then to have it be kind of not a direct answer, because I think a lot of these visits are out of state. Is that true?
we've done a couple out of state.
Okay, and there's probably many more to come. So I think that a concern for taxpayers is how much is gonna be spent on, obviously you're setting, we don't have a set number. You're not even saying like 5, it could be 20.
I don't think
people-
we'll be setting.
I'm
20
just saying,
people.
like, there's no set number, so what do I know? And like, how many people are going away for how many days? And obviously there's hotel expenses and food expenses and
There,
travel, airfare expenses. So to me, that's just concerning because I'm not seeing an idea of how much money is being allocated or
well, I
in a
can-
budget
I
that's
can
coming
tell you,
up
Kim's
for
not
that.
here tonight, but it's all fully covered in the current year budget. And this may be something we have to talk about to next year's budget if it has to expand. But here's the thing with that, and I don't disagree that could be a concern. Once the connections are made, it doesn't necessarily require a physical revisit, because then those connections are made and those people can advise us. And I will say this, there isn't a lot of this work going on in the public school space in Connecticut.
Right.
But we are trying to do things that are in driving distance. But they haven't all been, and we're not going everywhere that people would like us to go. And so, and we are very cognizant, and we look at discount airlines and, hotels and those things, but we can make a clear accounting for that.
Definitely. And where is it in the budget for this budget?
I'll have Kim come back.
Yeah,
to
I
you
definitely
on
would like to
that.
hear
Yeah.
where it is. And I probably won't be here next year, but I could just tell you this right now, for next year's budget, I will have a really hard time cutting teachers, many staff members, but having an astronomical line that is for traveling expenses for this. Just.
Yeah, I mean, it's not an
future.
astronomical line. It's all bundled in the whole professional learning, I'm pretty sure, but I'll
Yeah,
have Kim come back
I
and
understand,
do
but-
that. And I'm not aware of a district policy or even practice that prohibits out-of-state travel for professional learning. If we need to put one in, that's fine. And if the board wants us to limit some of this work moving forward, we certainly can do that.
Or put a cap on it. Is really-
Yeah. Yeah, I think we haven't sent out of state
Right,
any more than
exactly.
4 in a team. I think in my experience, a team of 3 to 4 is almost ideal, because if you send any more than that, it does get expensive. If you send any fewer than that, you sometimes limit, because sometimes there's lots to see in these
Right.
settings.
Right.
And so, yeah, but I appreciate that input.
Okay. Any other thoughts, comments?
You have a lot of different genres of employment, and I would think having some sort of a committee that are geared towards that, having Zoom meetings. Yes, in the trade school that I'm associated with, we all have what we call TTAC meetings, and it's basically trade advisory committees. And we have great success doing Zoom meetings with people from various employers. Let's get together. What are your gripes? What's the problem with people today with the work world? Well, okay, we heard that. What do you want? What are you looking for? I mean, that's a wonderful tool to use just to get industry people together, not necessarily traveling, just get them in one place,
Sure.
talk with the educators, communicate with the people who employ, and really have some template to go down and say, this is what they're asking us to do. And as simple as that, it works wonderful for our situation. And
Yeah.
we're very specific trait oriented, so I don't know how we would work that in, but maybe we can sort of create a little bit more vague genres. Okay, so hands-on type. Yeah, I don't, some template where the students can maybe find a direction.
Just one more question. Would it be possible to put together some kind of maybe the teams that do go out to these site visits? Would it be possible for them to hold some kind of debriefing so we can kind of figure out what it is they learned or took away from that site visit and how it might relate to our specific action team if we're on one? I know it's not
Well,
specific.
No. I think
Yeah,
that's really important. Yeah, that definitely is planned to go back through the action teams.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why the composition of even who goes on the site visits is looking at a specific site, what they're kind of known for,
Mhm.
and tying members of that action team. Now, are you asking to come back to this group?
not necessarily like a phone, maybe even a debrief that's just open to even the teachers in district that maybe aren't able to go out to these site visits to kind of learn what these people that attended took away.
Yeah,
from it and what
I
they
think
learned.
where that is best facilitated is through these action teams, because the work is related directly to the building of this. And so, you know, anyone's welcome to come to any of those. So I think, and they don't have to join permanently. If they wanted to just come to one meeting that would be talked about, I think that would be fine. But again, I think it's important to understand the reason we're doing these is to inform the design. And so it isn't just about, oh, they did that really well, isn't that nice? It's about what pieces of that could we do
Yeah, so
here.
we could learn about
Yeah.
what they took away that they think might be applicable.
I also think it's important for you guys to understand, as we talk about money, that some of these places freely offer curated resources that they have developed in all of these areas. And so when you look at potentially going out and buying or hiring consultants, no offense, to help us design this work, we might actually be saving money by forming these connections, because as it turns out, a lot of these individuals, they're not proprietary about their work. They want this work to happen everywhere, and so they're freely sharing stuff that they've put thousands of hours into developing and just handing that to us. So I think that's an important context to have, especially if you get questions about, you know, why are we paying people to go out of state, et cetera, et cetera.
So I know we want to take like 5 minutes before we start at 7. But
Rest of the slides? We're no.
well, that I have a question.
Yeah.
But I know we have the rest of the slides.
Yeah.
I want to echo what Maura said, and I'll quickly, I won't go exactly word for word and say exactly what she just said. On top of it, I'd like to look through the wording of these action teams and the strategic plan itself to engage our students and engage people that are not on the level of some of these words. Now, separately, these words are not huge words, but together, they make something that goes over a lot of people's heads if it's just read. So if we can somehow do that, I think it'd be really helpful, because I even know during our strategic meeting, when we had a student at our table, this all went over him, and he's a brilliant young kid. And I think if we want to engage the major stakeholders, which are our students, we need to be able to get them to understand these words, like Bob had said with the competency, even looking through the strategic plan, the open wall, competency-based, learner agency, socially embedded. It will not reach most of our learners, and it's not going to reach a lot of parents. It's not going to make parents want to stay engaged. So I would, that's all I'll say at this point.
Well, I think that fits into the advocacy strategy. So, yeah. All right, we're done with that Q&A period. Let's see where we get and then where we want to go from there. So we talked about the measurable outcomes, and I've talked about this before, but I'll just kind of go quickly through this. This is the so what of the strategic plan. It's rooted in the hopes and dreams of our learners and their families, which we surveyed on through Thought Exchange last fall. Qualitative and quantitative measures. We think it's important to measure not just what happens to learners when they're with us, which is historically what districts do in this space, but actually to try to follow them after they leave us, because all of our mission statements and visions and all of these things talk about what they're able to do when they leave us, but often we just don't follow up with that, so we don't really know if we've really prepared them or if we haven't. And so these outcomes would reflect one or more of those strategic plan domains, either the academics, the employability, the wellness, or the citizenship. And I shared very late in this afternoon, I apologize, one of our staff members who does the infographic is taken ill, and so we weren't able to get this to you guys as quickly as we wanted to. But we just wanted you to know that we're kind of working on that as a draft, and we think it's important, whatever we do in this space, that we're measuring what we do so that people can say, oh, that's why they're doing all that. And also to let you know that later in the meeting, you're going to get an update on test scores. Those test scores are included in this plan, but they're just one element of what our learners take with us when they leave us. And many of you have said that to me personally, many of our groups have said that, and so we think it's important to report those test scores and graduation rates and all the things we probably typically reported, but not do that alone, or we're probably not going to really stretch ourselves in terms of how we're trying to help our learners in their future success. So this is when I thought we could have a discussion about that, but I guess we don't have time for that right now. So maybe table that to the next meeting. Maybe I will table these slides too. And maybe some other time I'll ask you how you want these updates to come back to you, because I do want to honor our time, and we have a lot of special guests that are here. So I do apologize for that, but I thought it was going to be tough to get it in an hour anyway.
We're gonna take a 5-minute recess.
I know.
We can turn it on.
Okay.
Lindsay, what's your-
Okay, we're going to resume our meeting. We're actually going to start our meeting with item number 4, which is presentations and recognitions. I understand we have a number of students here that are going to be sharing their exhibits. And I believe we can start. Did you have a specific order, or I just call a school? Okay, I'll call Brewster School. I believe we have Taylor Hall and Carter Kilroy. Do I have the right people? Oh, they're over here. Okay, they're all over.
Police material.
And I believe these are grade 2 students.
We are ready. Good evening, everybody. We're very excited to come share from Brewster School. It's our pleasure today to be here to talk about some of our exceptional learners we have at Brewster School. At Brewster School, we had over 30 children submit some of their shared learning experiences that they had outside of the classroom that they exhibited at the Durham Fair. And our learners that did share what they showed at their exhibits earned over 60 ribbons, which was phenomenal. Our learners exhibited things such as art, building, construction, agriculture, science. All of that learning took place outside of our classroom traditional walls. And we're proud to share that learning with you today. And I have some fabulous learners from grade 2 with me today. I have Carter Kilroy, who is a second grader from Mrs. Goriev's room, and I have Taylor Hall, a second grader from Mr. Navio's room. So we'll have Taylor go first.
Hello, my name Hello, my name is Taylor, and I'm a second Taylor Hall, and I'm a second grader in Mr. Navio's room at Brewster School. Thank you for letting me share tonight at the Board of Education meeting. This year, I submitted 2 entries into the down there. I submitted 2 scrunchies and a painting of hot chocolate. I felt proud and excited to win first place and best in show for my scrunchies and a second place ribbon for my painting. I sewed my scrunchies from soft fabric and thread. My nana taught me how to use a sewing machine. Thank you for letting me share my projects with you. Have a amazing night. Hello, my name is Carter Kilroy, and I'm a second grader in Miss Gorian's room at Brewster School. Thank you for letting me present tonight at the Board of Education meeting. This year, I submitted an entry into the Zoom fair. I submitted a feather collection. I felt excited because I won first place ribbon for my collection. When I was looking at my feathers for my feather collection, I found out it was against the law to keep most feathers. This law was made a long time ago because people were farming birds to put a feather on their head. Some feathers that I found but did not add to my collection, which seasonal feathers, breeding feathers, and robin feathers. I learned so much about feathers by putting together my collection.
Thank you, Carter and Taylor. Thank you. We have Lyman School.
Good evening, everyone. I have the pleasure of introducing a couple of our young learners from Mrs. Sabisky's class who are so excited to share with you tonight. We had a lot of learners who did individual projects for the Durham Fair, and we also had several classes that did a class project that they entered. I also would like to, holding up the project, Mrs. Sabisky took the time to join us tonight. But without further ado, I would like to introduce Maggie and Brooke, who are entitled about Mrs. Sabisky's class share for the Durham Fair. Is it okay if I take the microphone off?
Yes.
These guys are pretty good. They have shared with the whole school recently at an assembly about the project, so they're pretty good at holding the mic.
Swimming in the summer sea, a Durham Fair project made by Room 17 at John Lyman School. Brooke, are you ready to share about a Durham Fair project? Sure, Margaret, let's start now. We made a Durham Fair project by sharing ideas and putting them all together into one project. We used fabric we had in our Getting to Know You book. We made the fabric into clothes and floors stickable. We took a dead branch from a tree outside our classroom and made it the sticks into people. Each one represents a learner in our classroom, room 17. We have a worry doll hanging on our chalkboard, and the little people kind of look like her. Also, we wove our fabrics to make a creative sky. We used other fabric scraps from the classroom to make the water. There is a dog because we love dogs. We used real sand to make the ocean float. We wrote things we are proud of and things we accomplished. It was nice we all made this display together. We were happy we won a purple ribbon. Thank you all for listening to our show. We appreciate it.
Memorial School.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing us this time to come share some of our favorite Durham Fair memories and our shares that were created. As you heard from Brewster and Lyman, there were many students that entered individual projects, but we decided for Memorial School we would showcase one of our class projects. This is from room 22 and room 24, and it is entitled Reach for the Stars. And we have Avery and Riley to share a little bit about that.
My name is Avery Davidson and I'm a 5th grader at Memorial School. My name is Riley Centeno and I'm a 5th grader too. We made this Reach for the Stars poster in one of our classes. We traced our arm and hand. Next, we wrote goals for ourselves to achieve in 5th grade and put them on our hands. We entered the poster in the gym where my goal is to read my books. My goal is to write an essay and learn how to divide. We all got a ribbon for our entry. I'm so excited to reach my goal.
Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you, Avery and Riley. And last, Strong School.
Mr. Fitzgerald and I are really excited to have two of our young learners here share what they entered into the Durham Fair. We have an 8th grader, we've got Arabella DiPentima, and we have 7th grade Logan Dahlheimer. So they're each going to share what they've entered and what they've won. Come on, you can go first.
Hi, Hi, my name is Arabella DeVintima, and I'm in 8th grade at Strong Middle School. And tonight I'm going to be talking a little bit about my photo exhibits and the process. So every year I submit photos to the Durham Fair, and they are hung and put on display in the youth exhibits. There are 4 categories for each photo. There are scenery, animals, selfies, and people. I normally choose a photo for each category. The process is so fun because it makes me so excited for the Durham Fair. But sometimes it is hard to choose just one photo for each category. After you submit your photos, when you go to the fair, you can see which placement you got according to the ribbon color next to your photo. They are ranked 1st through 4th, and each has a different color. So the better the photo, the higher the ranking. There are also some creative ribbons that you can get if your photo is extraordinary or artistic and things like that. The photo exhibits for the Durham Fair are really important for 2 reasons. First, because you get money, and secondly, more importantly, because we want to have a youth exhibit building without kids seeing these photos. The photo exhibits in the youth building are such a big part of the Durham Fair, and everyone always loves looking at the different photos and seeing which placements people got. Thank you.
Right before I start, I did not have the project with me because my dog tried to eat it.
That's true. It happened.
Okay.
Like a velociraptor.
Sadie.
Hello, my name is Logan Dahlheimer, and I'm in 7th grade at Strong. Tonight, I wanted to share about one of my Durham Fair projects. Every year, my family and I pick different exhibits to enter for the fair. We always do these at home and have a lot of fun. This year was even more fun because I got to brainstorm a project at school. Ms. Hamilton helped many of us brainstorm ideas and find some materials so that we could work on this at home. I chose a metal lantern project, which used button batteries to turn on LED lights. I had so much fun completing it and won a 2nd place ribbon at the fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Arabella and Logan. Oh, exciting. I just love going to the fair and going through all the booths. I just wish I had more time to read all the names. I'd be there for days, longer than the fair is even open. 4B, we have our high school reporters, Hayden, Catherine, and Christine.
Hello, I'm Hayden Gonzalez. I'm going to be reporting on the students' sports life. So Cognac student athletes are excited for the upcoming championship season these next few weeks. Girls soccer and volleyball are in line for the Shoreline and state championships. Volleyball is gearing up for the Dig Pink game on Wednesday, October 19th. The Cognac football team's next home games are Saturday, October 22nd and Friday, November 4th. Boys and girls cross country will have their Shoreline championship meet at Hammonasset on Thursday, October 20th, and are going to race in the boys class S and girls class SS championships at Wickham Park on Saturday, October 29th. The Blue Devil football team had a great crowd full of family, friends, and students at last Friday night's Pink Out game. The CRHS pep band, led by Mr. Fisher, and the cheerleaders performed at the game as well. As we move towards championship season and the stakes get higher, students are eager to support one another, such as attending night games under the lights or supporting breast cancer awareness month fundraisers. Seniors especially are excited for their last high school fall season. Earlier today at the CRHS CogCon event, captains and athletes had an athletic showcase for upcoming 7th and 8th graders from Strong Middle School. Students were proud to represent Cognac and demonstrate the amazing aspects of having a small school sports environment. The tight-knit teams and communities CRHS athletes have been a part of and formed are essential to the success of our programs. Lastly, Cognac hosted a unified sports event with game soccer and plenty of team pride. The Daniel Han and Guilford unified teams joined in on the fun, and even though the rain poured down outside, the teams didn't let that stop their fun as the event continued on in the gym. Spirits were high and the students were excited to cheer each other on. Moving forward into the last part of the fall season, students are excited for the team community, relationships, and competition that both awaits and unites them.
All right, so a quick recap for music stuff that's already happened and is going to happen. At the very beginning of the month, on October 1st, a group comprised of current and also graduated chorus members sang as the primary choir for our beloved cooking teacher, Miss Bowman's wedding. And at the same time, the pep band played at the first home football game of the season. They also played again at the game this past Friday and will play on the 22nd. The Shoreline Music Festival began on the 6th with a 5-hour rehearsal for both band and chorus groups. They will have their second and last rehearsal tomorrow and will perform at 7 in the auditorium. Tickets are going to cost $7 at the door, but I'm sure it's going to be a great performance. So encourage you to go. And then finally, this year's musical was announced. We're going to be performing Matilda with rehearsal starting in January and performance occurring in late March. And to ensure the 6th through 8th graders at Strong will be able to participate in a musical this year since they haven't been able to for the past 2 years. They are also invited to join, which is a unique opportunity for both them and us. A little bit special, so.
Okay, and finally, we have our student life. So there's been a number of activities in the past month and one to look forward to this week. So starting off this morning, all freshmen, sophomores, and juniors took the PSAT, which helps them prepare for the SAT that they'll take in the spring of their junior year. And while our underclassmen were taking their tests, some of our seniors were helping with Memorial's Fall Field Day, which was pretty fun. And following the PSAT this morning, as Hayden just mentioned, Coggins hosted its first ever CogCon, which is a new spin on the Blue Devils Fair, where we have all of our clubs, our academics, and our sports all set up a table in the gym. And the 7th and 8th graders were bussed up from Strong, and they got to walk around and see all that there is to be involved in here at the high school. And for a couple of weeks now, we've had our tech teachers, Ms. Walsh and Mr. Brad, and they've hosted an open studio during advisory. So every week, students have the opportunity for an hour to work on an engineering project or an art project down in our tech wing. And as was mentioned, we had the Durham Fair, and many students were involved, whether it was volunteering, performing, or just having fun with all that the fair has to offer. So we'd like to highlight especially our Eco Club, which collected an amazing 4.49 tons of combustible waste at the Durham Fair. So props to them for that. That's amazing. 2 more things. We had Coggins oceanography class took a field trip on the 6th, where they kayaked from Stony Creek to Outer Islands and back. It's a long day of kayaking. So go them.
Yeah.
And this week, we are leading up to our homecoming dance, which the juniors will host. It is themed Disco Fever, and we've had a fun day. Today was CRHS Merch Spirit Day. Yesterday, we had Neon Day. Tomorrow will be tie versus tie-dye day. And on Friday, we'll have Disco Day leading up to the fun dance.
Nice,
Thank
very
you.
nice. Thank you. We have been invited to the music festival for tomorrow night, and I'm looking forward to it. Next item under number 4 is our Unified Sports, Unified Campus. At our last meeting, one of our teachers, Rob Joris, we celebrated the fact that he is now our teacher of the year in the school district. And what he's going to do is going to make a presentation of his program to show why he was chosen as teacher of the year.
All right, thank you very much for having me and letting me showcase 2 of our very important programs. I also teach 3 sections of health education here, and we made great community partnerships with many different organizations that allows our students to learn from experts in the field. I think we certainly have a showcase on our unified sports program. We've become a model program for the state of Connecticut. In 2015-16 school year, we started a program here that runs a unified sports program during the school day, which is pretty unique because usually they're after school. And that limits who can participate in the program. So there's a lot of kids that have sports after school, or a lot of different activities that would prohibit them from that model if there was an after school program. So many schools have followed our lead. After that first year, we were named Rookie School of the Year by the CIC. The following year, we were the exemplar high school year. This past year, I was named Unified Sports Coach of the Year from the CIC. I was also named Team Connecticut Youth Leadership Coach, and I went with 2 of our students to USA Games in Florida. So we've got an excellent showcase for that. But what built up for that was our kids presented at the Youth Leadership Conference for the CIC, the state of Connecticut. That stands for the Connecticut Interscholastic Athletic Conference. And a guy by the name of Bo Doherty saw us present. He was a guy who created the unified sports model. And he said, wow, I can't believe what I created 40 years ago looks like this today in schools. He was really excited about that. which put us on the New England leadership stage where our kids presented there, and then on the national stage. And now we're gonna have kids present at the Utah Youth Leadership Summit and the Colorado Youth Leadership Summit remotely about how our program is a little bit different. So we're a national unified champion school, and there's actually 10 standards of excellence, but the first 3 are inclusive youth sports programs. So that students with and without disabilities on the same team competing and practicing in athletics. Another component is youth leadership opportunities. Those are the opportunities where our kids speak at these conferences or go to all the district schools. Our administration in the different district schools have been super supportive. We've done full school assemblies, which is another standard of excellence. So we have the kids putting together what they want to do at these schools. They say, you know, we want to play a basketball game. We speak to administration. We figure that out. We go there. We want a full school engagement activity. The kids wanted to, you know, speak to the school after the game. We did that. We ended up staying for lunch, mingling, signing autographs. It was awesome. At Memorial, we did a volleyball game against the teachers. At Strong, we did a pep rally. Here at Coggins, we invited Middletown High School. We included our cheerleaders, our pep band. We did a live feed of the event so everyone at Middletown High School can watch the event. The parents could watch it at home. And it's just been an incredible experience. I truly am blessed to be in this position. When we were creating this model, Brian Falcone in 2014 said, you know what, why are you the right person for this job? And I had almost 20 years of coaching experience behind me at that time. And most of that as a head varsity coach and 2-sport varsity coach. And I said, I promise you, I'm the right guy for this job. And I think I've, you know, fulfilled that. And the part that's so amazing about this whole unified program and having it in the school and having it during the school day is that I really truly get to work it with everyone at their best. The teachers, students with disabilities, and kids without disabilities. They're really truly at their best. And we held a fall festival last week. It was Tuesday, and what the other kids spoke about, we had Daniel, Hand, and Guilford, but most importantly, we had all of our fall sports teams there. And it was just incredible. Everyone is having a good time. Everyone has a smile, and everyone is in their best. Because of the success of our unified sports program in 2019, our administrator at the time, our principal at the time, Brian Falcone, said, let's try this thing called campus unification. We kind of came up with this together, and you're going to see the same model, kids with and without disabilities together, coming up with projects that they want to do on campus. And since then, we've created a garden outside near the portables. We've created a trail build project behind the stadium. We've hosted car shows. We painted the entire downstairs, the weight room, the girls outside the girls' locker room, outside the boys' locker room with different motivational murals. And this is all learner-centered. They've come up with these activities. They propose them to me first, to another teacher second, to building admin next, and then to buildings and grounds, Super Drill and Jimmy Croto. And if we get that far, we move forward on the project. If we have any obstacles along the way, we figure it out together. So I'm learning with the kids. And again, they're at their best. I think everyone in the building's at their best. They're excited to kind of bring on these endeavors that the kids want to do. So it's a blessing that I've kind of fallen into this. And I hope that we could expand these programs, you know, in our other regional school district, 13 schools. And, you know, I talked to admin last week about that, and we're going to try to kind of figure that out. I don't know what that's going to look like just yet, but we're going to figure it out. But I wanted to bring 2 people here, Shannon Moore and Ethan BC, that have been in both programs, and let them kind of tell you what it's all about and hear from them, because, you know, it's great to hear from me, but you may as well hear from the kids, right?
Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Moore, and I'm a senior at Cultivate Regional High School. I've always had a passion for helping my peers who live with physical and mental disabilities. Unified sports and campus unification has sparked that passion to a level I could never imagine. These classes give learners with disabilities an opportunity like many like them do not have. It does not only benefit those with disabilities, though. When I step into that classroom, I'm reminded how important kindness and inclusion is to everyone involved. It's a different environment than any other class I've taken at RSD13. Teaching and learning is cohesive and unified in campus unification. I believe everyone should take this class. No matter your social, academic, or athletic status, everyone's welcome at Unified. Everyone's welcome to laugh, make friends, and spark new interests. No matter who you are, Unified is for you.
Hi, I'm Ethan BC, as Mr. Bedore said. I'm currently a senior here at Coggins, and I'm here to talk about the importance of the unified programs. For me personally, the unified sports program has had a very profound impact, as I credit it with being the main reason that I came to Coggins rather than another school, as in Xavier. So one of the other things that I thought was very cool about the unified sports program was that it allowed me as a freshman to interact with a lot of students that I may not have normally interacted with as a freshman. Secondly, this year I'm taking the campus unification class, which I think is really cool because it allows students such as Shannon and myself to work with all different kinds of students to make the school a better place, from building a trail system out behind the football field to just trying to make the school a much better environment for everyone, regardless of any other circumstances. And in the end, I think that the unified program has a very positive impact as a school and its culture overall. Thank you.
That's all this finished. Are there any questions about any of these programs or anything you'd like to hear from kids about? Yes.
How do we bring these to the other schools in district, and what's the time, like, what do we need to be able to do that? I don't know if that's a question for you or.
I'm not sure that's an exact question for me. I mean, we started talking about this in other buildings and kind of because I'm the face of this at the high school and I'm involved heavily, a lot of parents and teachers are coming to me and asking that question. And I'm not 100% sure how we do that, other than I think I just need to keep on talking with admin and then, you know, create a budget to maybe change what my job looks like and reimagine it as a whole. So I'm not sure I have that exact answer at the moment, but I'm all for working with all of you to figure that out. I think all our schools can benefit from it, and we are the model school for Connecticut. And Connecticut leads the country with 97% of its schools having unified programs, most of them being after school, and no state comes anywhere near that. So I'm pretty confident us having it as a class, and many of the Shoreline schools coming with their administrators and watching what we do here, and then starting programs at their school is influential statewide. And I think if we, you know, can make this district-wide or through MTA, we can certainly be a model program for Connecticut, absolutely, and most likely, you know, the United States and maybe global.
Yeah, if I could, Rob's energy and passion is very persuasive, and I think that's because of his authenticity and how much he believes in the program. You heard this from these learners as well. If you've been to some of these things, like, just hard to describe if you haven't been there. But what I can share is that our entire administrative team is very supportive of expanding. I think, to his point, some of it's simpler to do and some of it's more difficult to do. And it really depends on to what extent we consider it a program. My understanding is that there were some kind of one-off assemblies and events on the other campuses pre-COVID. And I think everyone's excited to bring those back because they kind of know how to do those. I think Rob is pushing our thinking around, could it be something more kind of like a permanent presence, like it is at the high school? And that's a more complex issue, and it might be a budget issue as well. So I think, you know, we will certainly consider that, working with Rob and with our administrative team, and you all may need to do that as well.
I think that's a big priority. I mean, it's every parent's wish and dream for their special needs children to have opportunities to be included, invited, you know, and valued, and have access to the same experiences and opportunities as every other child. So I feel like this really has to be a priority, and whatever we need to look at and what funds would need to be available for that. I think that should be a priority.
I think it's a priority for both, to be a priority for these kids to have access to the kids that are different. I fully agree with you.
And the great thing is it's proven to help kids in the classroom as well when they have that activity, and then they get in the classroom, they're just more engaged, and it's always been a wonderful combination.
Yeah, there's great statistics to prove that on the Special Olympics SONA, so Special Olympics North American website. I believe that's also 97% of people that participate in unified programs, whether they have disabilities or not, benefit from that, both athletically and socially. And I think the social inclusion piece is probably more important than the athletic piece. And so we just came from Daniel Hand High School. I just came from an event. And the coach emailed me yesterday and said, I only have 4 kids with disabilities and I don't have any kids without disabilities. I'm not sure how I'm going to make this work. And I coached the Daniel Hand hockey team when they're outside of season. So I asked the boys to come and help today. And it was such an incredible experience for those hockey boys to interact with the kids with disabilities. It was just the most amazing thing. And we made it work. We split up our kids and we didn't have to cancel the event. And it became such an amazing event. But the difference with our program is I have those kids during the school day. They're committed. It's a class. It's part of their grade. I have a coaching certification too, which all of the other unified coaches has, but most of it is outside of the school day. But then you run into problems with kids attending. Westbrook followed our lead, and now they have a gigantic program because they have it as a class. And Westbrook is coming next week. They're coming for our campus unification class during the school day. They'll tie-dye t-shirts with us. Then they're going to eat lunch with us, and then they're going to participate in our unified sports class. And these students know them by name now, and we're friends with them. And then we're going to print on those shirts, Westbrook, Coggin United. So we've created great bonds with the Shoreline schools that have followed our leads. So we are the model, and hopefully we could all figure it out together. I'm open to whatever we have to do to figure that out.
I also just want to say kudos because you're also doing a great job with, personalized learning, learner agency, and open walls, because the students you said are picking what they're interested in. So that's really connecting with what reimagining is. And it's the first great concrete example that I've heard of it thus far. So it's awesome.
It's fantastic. So one of the things that we're doing is we're preparing for a unified prom at Guilford and Madison. So we do a lot of stuff with Madison and Guilford and Westbrook. And the kids had to decide what they were going to, the CIC gave us $1,000 grant to do whatever we wanted with. So they decided what they wanted to do. We bought a button maker, we made buttons. The graphic design class collaborated with our class, in the art class, Mr. Bockley's class, they're painting posters, we're 3D printing keychains. All of this was student generated. None of these were my ideas. I said, here's the amount of money we have. Let's do whatever we want to do. Well, we work with Mr. Bradinini's, graphic design class there at the same time as our campus unification class. Ask Mr. Brad, he's all for it. Let's do it. Figure out how to do these things. Figure out how to use the 3D printer and make buttons and other cool favors for the prom. So, yeah, we're totally on track there.
Thank you. Thank you so much. As you can see, Rob's programs showcase the core ethical values of our district, and they also exemplify inclusion, acceptance of diversity, and equity as well. Nice job. Nice going. Next item on the agenda is public comment. We will start with the in-person public comment. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on agenda items first? Well, I think she raised her hand first. Oh, Viola, sorry.
I'll take it off. Good evening, Tanya Viola from Durham. First off, I would like to say it would be appreciated if the board members would be able to have a mic for speaking to the assembly, because it isn't just talking across the table. You have an audience, and I think we have the technology to accommodate that, because we've had boards in the past have placement with a mic between every 2 or 3 people sitting. It makes it hard to hear sometimes, and when people have low voices especially. I saw in the paper just the other day in the Middletown Press about your mulling over the closure of Lyman School and expanding the programs to Memorial School for the elementary learning. Of course, their heading doesn't really coincide with the article itself, in as much as it says closure of 2 schools. But when you read through it, they mentioned about Brewster Elementary School would be serving only the pre-K program. we had built on that in the past and expanded it because of opportunities in education for the student enrollment there. I would like to know just how much would this really be a savings when you're talking only pre-K, which is a very small number of the student population. I understand Memorial taking on K through 5 would probably need an expansion. I mean, it just seems that way because of the numbers and seeing the projection, of course, not to 2024 or no, 2026, I guess, in the paper about enrollment coming up a little bit again. If we do close both schools, definitely, I don't think that would be smart for the simple reason if enrollment does start to pick up, you need a place to have those kids. And I just feel that with Brewster being the larger of the schools and the setting, maybe give it consideration for turning around for having the elementary school there and Memorial School remaining for the pre-K, which is designed, it is smaller. But then again, maybe I'm off on class projections because I know we haven't seemed to curtail any of the bus transportation in all these years, even with having decreased enrollments. We went to maybe a van or so, but we haven't done much in the contract for savings for the taxpayers. So with that said, I just hope that with everything going on, that if in fact this new unified sports program also would be incorporated into day hours, then would there be credits eligible in place of regular gym for students, which is a requirement for graduation? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Hi, Christine Cowan, Durham. I came here tonight to voice my support for expanding unified sports. So about 5 years ago, I emailed Nancy Heckler, who used to be the principal at Brewster, and I said, hey, I have this great idea to do Differences Day in our district, and to basically, we would set up these stations and kids would have to dribble a basketball just with one hand, or you would put a blindfold on and you would have to color. And so that these kids could start learning, empathy, compassion, kindness, and really start to understand what kids, with disabilities were going through. And she was just like, yeah, let's do it. And then the next year I was like, hey, Tom Ford, you want to do this with us? And he was like, sure, let's do it. And then COVID hit. And now we're, kind of in the works to bring that back. But really, I think the highlight of when we have done that is really when Unified Sports came and did a basketball game for the kids. I mean, the little kids thought that they were literally celebrities. It's the most heartwarming thing. And ever since that moment, I've been constantly advocating to expand this program. So as a mother of a special needs child in our district, Mackenzie is 9, she's in 4th grade at Memorial. And every day, just like all of us parents, what do we say to our kids? Hey, how was your day? What did you do? Who did you talk to? Blah, 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 right? And every day I said to Mackenzie, hey, what'd you do at recess? Sat on bench. Who'd you sit with? My para. Did you talk to anybody? No, I have no friends. And this is every day. And it's, she's 9, and I can't even begin to tell you, as a parent, how incredibly heartbreaking it is to say that my child literally has no one. Although this year there is a new kid that I hear is her boyfriend that she does like to talk to. So I will say, after 9 years, there's a new kid in district, and they're 2 peas in a pod. So I have that. But really, the point is that, my child does not get to experience anything that our typical kids do. And it is, like I said, it's just heartbreaking. Mackenzie has participated in the Miracle League Foundation out of Hartford, which kind of is like a unified sports team. So like they get a lot of the college teams. So like last week when she did baseball, or 2 weeks ago, it was St. Joseph's men's baseball team. They come in, they give each one of those boys like one of the kids, and they, play baseball like on their field. And it's literally like the only time I have seen this kid light up, because she feels like she's doing something like her peers. And although she's intellectually disabled, she is very self-aware of what she is capable of doing. And she knows like she can't go on the playscape. So of course she's just going to sit on the bench. I mean, what other opportunity do we really have for her? And that's no discredit to the staff, here. I mean, the staff is amazing with her. I think she kind of rules her staff a little bit, but there's really nothing for her to identify with someone of her age. So I really, really hope Rob has done such an amazing job with this program. It clearly shows by all of his accomplishments. It clearly shows, like, I was ready to cry with those 2 kids that were talking about it. So I really hope that this will eventually be a priority, for the board and administration to expand the program to our elementary schools. Thank you.
Is there anyone else? Anyone else? Yeah.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for your time. Sarah Salling from Durham. I have 2 kids in the district. I am also here to express my desire and ask for commitment from the board to expand the unified program here in the district. I have a 1st grader, Sophie, in Brewster School. Sophie has Down syndrome, and kids with Down syndrome are prone to low muscle tone. So it makes it hard for them to participate in typical activities that most of the kids can do. And I share Christine's heartbreak. Unless you have been there and have experienced it, it's really hard to appreciate how hard it is to be turned away from typical facilities. My family has tried very hard to get Sophie involved in just normal activities that her older sister gets to participate in, and for multitudes of reasons, often it's staffing or capacity at certain facilities. We've been told no a lot. And so I would just love to see that program expanded. I was thrilled to see it on the agenda tonight. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Anyone else? Okay, we're going to go to our online participants. Do we have anyone online that would like to speak?
We do have a bunch, but I don't see anyone with their hand up.
Right, yeah. I'll take them if you're gone. If you want to speak up, we'll have public comment now at the end of the meeting as well.
Yeah, we can come back at the end and do that.
Okay, item number 6 is approval of minutes. I'm going to break it up into 2 because I believe there might be some corrections for the August 18th. August 10th meeting.
They've been updated, so we can.
Oh, they've been all updated, so
Yeah.
we can approve those. Are there any changes to the September 14th meeting? I didn't see any. Okay, so can I have a motion to approve the August 10th, 2022 and September 14th, 2022 minutes?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, motion by Lindsay and seconded. I'm sorry. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Item number 7, superintendent's report. Part A, Merwin Foundation Learner-Centered Grant winners for 2022-23.
Yes, thank you, Lucy. If you guys aren't tired of listening to me, I will try to make this a little more brief than the work session, but I think Bob had brought this up at our last meeting, and some of this information was emailed to board members in the spring when some of these grants had been awarded, but just to bring everybody up to speed, and others can speak to some of this better than I can, but we have this very benevolent foundation trust, the Merwin Trust in our district, and they give us money every year. and it's fantastic. And they don't tell us how to spend it. They ask us how we would like to spend it. And when they came to me last year and asked me about how I would spend it, I really didn't feel qualified, because I felt like with some of the work that we've talked about, trying to do some of this learner-centered work, it would be a better use to make it known that these funds were available and ask individual or groups of teachers if they would apply, and that we would turn these into kind of internal grants. And the trustees agreed to that. So I really want to thank them for allowing us to try this year. And I also want to thank the teachers who wrote the grants and who are either currently implementing them or have plans to implement them later in the school year. We have 6 different grants that were awarded that total $10,000, which was the total award. I don't know why it happened this way, but all the applicants and all the awardees came from 2 of our campuses, Strong and Coggins. If we do this again in the future, I'm hoping other schools might get involved. And sometimes in something like this, the first group is the hardest to get because they don't really know what it is. And then the word spreads about things that they've been doing. So I can't promise that this is what we'll do next year, but definitely going to bring it up with the trustees to see what they think about these grants and how they might go forward. And so here's what we've got going on. We actually have 2 that have the same name, but they're on different campuses. And you've actually heard some of this referred to in some of the presentations. It's the Open Studio design model. So we've got Ryan Bothamley and Diane Walsh up here at the high school. And basically what they have done is they've taken the existing advisory period that has some flexibility in it. And they've created this Open Studio to give learners the opportunity, and these are their words, I'm just reading here, for passionate, independent, collaborative, and interdisciplinary projects. So they open the graphics and the robotics lab, the art studio, the ceramics studio. It's open to any learner. You don't have to even be in one of those classes. You might be more advanced if you are, but as long as you're interested in the visual arts, technology, or any type of combination, you're welcome to be part of that. And it's a place to create independent project-based learning that lives outside of kind of our regular education program. And the teachers that are involved are facilitators in this. So again, to your point earlier, Mariah, sounds a lot like about some of the things we're trying to do. And that's why we put these grants out there, because they don't threaten, so to speak, the current programming. They're existing outside of it, but they're helping inspire learners to do great things. Observational drawing, sewing, landscape painting, functional pottery, circuitry, stained glass design, sculpture, college portfolio development. Those are just some examples that those folks gave me. Then we also have an Open Studio design model being run by Tina Hurlbert and Amy Schaefer at Strong. And true confession, Tina was part of the design of the high school one, and then we transferred her to the middle school. And so she kind of brought that idea over there, which I think is really cool. And I don't want to say it's been more successful at Strong than it has been at Coggins, but I think the overall participation actually has been a little bit higher over there. And so there it's limited to the wood studio and the art studio. Also project centers, passion or interest, and facilitated by the 2 teachers. And just to give you a few numbers from Strong, because Tina really went to town on her summary. 88% of the learners, they were all surveyed, 88% of them said they were somewhat or very interested in doing that. And the group was so big that they've actually had to try to put some caps on who can be there at one time just for supervision. But the middle school also has advisory, but they also have these tutorials. And it's been said that sometimes we could do maybe better in that space with our learners' time. And I think that's been happening. And so she's saying just in the wood shop, she's got like 41 a week that are coming in and doing this. And again, that's outside of the regular programming. that happens. And then Amy, I don't have the numbers from Amy, but she's also doing that with art. Another project that's happening at the high school is for a sensory room. And this one is specifically designed, and again, let me give credit where credit. Kate DiMartino is the one that's putting that together. Those that are in life skills and in our alternative program. So a lot of our learners with disabilities. And this is if you're not familiar with sensory rooms, I've seen them in several of the schools in my past district. They have a lot of different purposes, but one of the things they really do is help regulate kind of emotional behaviors for learners that kind of struggle with that by allowing them to interact with different sensory things, physical things. And so this is still in the design process, but some of it has started to arrive and be put into place. And it's going to be located in the special ed classroom between where the Cog Academy alternative program is housed in the ABA room. So, you know, Kay wanted me to share that the tools will be different. Some of the tools will be for those who get overstimulated very quickly and need to really kind of reduce in the moment. And then the others are those who just crave that stimulation and need it. So it can be built in to their regular school day, or even as a break. If they're in a regular classroom setting, which many of these learners are, it's kind of an outlet that can be built into their programming. And so she is very excited about that program. Two other ones that are strong, and both of these have not really happened yet. They're both in the planning phases, but I'll mention them just for your information. Rebecca Sanusis is doing education and exploration career experiences. And this is really trying to beef up and utilize those funds to beef up the career day that they were doing at Strong prior to COVID. And also perhaps to bring in a keynote speaker to kind of anchor that career day. Because one of the things that she sees at Strong, and one of the things that motivated the grant here is that, and this is all throughout our reimagining work, is sometimes it's very hard for learners to see what they're doing in school and how that really impacts their life when they're out of school. And I would say of all the ages, not to pick on middle school, but that may be one of the hardest sells there because they're becoming adolescents, and they're struggling with a lot of things. Some of you are parents of middle schoolers, so you can attest to that. But they're not quite old enough yet to be fully, into jobs and some of those things. And then the last one is another one that Amy Schaefer is doing. And this one, I'm intrigued to see how it turns out. It's a little smaller scale than the others, but she's calling it Culinary Arts Meets Visual Arts. And so it's all about the visual art or the artistry of cooking. I don't know how much of that you do in your programming, but she gives cake decorating and some of these things as some examples, but she's got a plan to bring in a professional baker who would come in and work not just on the creation of the food products, but also really talk about that presentation and all that goes into kind of making it visually appealing. And again, I really applaud Amy for kind of seeing those connections. And I have to believe that once she puts this out there and has it together, we're probably gonna have to put limits on that too. And I see some of you interested in signing up, but I think it's just for the learners at Strong at this point. So again, I know that was a bit long, but Bob asked, and I really want to thank the Merwin Trust for again, not just giving us the money, but allowing us to try to let the teachers lead us in this work instead of us saying, this is just what we think the monies should be applied for. And we may go the same route going forward, given what appears to be the success of this program. And maybe we can even get a little more than 10,000 this year. I don't know. I'll also say this, because some of them are in different places. I am interested and they're interested, if there's time in the agenda, maybe in the early spring, the teachers themselves actually coming back and showcasing some of this. If there's room on the agenda, we understand there may not be, but yeah. So that's it. And
when we'll hear from her and on that, on the grant plan for this year.
I haven't met with them yet. I'm scheduled to meet with them, I think in the next week or two. And again, I'm still learning how to navigate. I think their trust requires them to give us money, but I don't think it says how much money or what. And I think one of the pieces that is required, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, is the spirit and the letter of that foundation is that it's to kind of supplement what the regular education budget is able to provide. And what we've tried to do in this space strategically is the more examples of learner-centered education that we can provide, we think that's also going to help with getting more buy-in, not just from teachers, but from learners, from families. And to see that the more that we can do this, even without changing the whole system right away, that this would help inspire. That was my experience in my last district. And like I said, in the first year in that district, we had trouble getting enough people to even go for the grants. But once they saw what was produced, then sadly, we had way more applicants than the grant would even supply. But that's a good kind of problem to have, where you've got people that really want to push the boundaries of what's being done traditionally.
Lindsay, the trust is about 100 years old, and the endowments on some of these things laws have changed over the years. So now, because of their status as 501(c), they have to actually distribute money every year. So their endowment, goes up and down with the stock market and everything, but they do have to distribute money, and their purpose is, what Doug said, for education to support, not for like, providing pencils or anything like that, but
Right.
for
Yeah.
for
Well, the reason I asked that is that I also like to keep just in the back of your head to bring up Cogajali. Put two words together. Cogajali Valley Educational Fund, the grants that they do every year, their applications start in March. So.
Yeah, and that's right. And I think it's great that we have those two organizations that can do that. And again, theirs is a little bit different, where it's a little bit broader, I think, than how we had designed the learner-centered grants. But that's another great organization that we really appreciate their support too. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
Just the concern I have with the advisory where students can find their passions. I really encourage a high level of safety. We're dealing with wood shops, different kids that might not be normally acclimated to that shop. I would just highly encourage stop, basic training, because it's bad things can happen. Again, that's a huge focus on what I do, because we have an exploratory, we have new students every 2 days, and you just really have to put a focus on wood shop. What else? Spinning things like what, pottery going on? I don't know, but just really put a focus on that. Give them a 5-minute. You have to do this. Unrestrained hair, things like that are bad things.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for the
Safety
teachers,
shoes.
but I have to believe they've built that.
Yeah, Logan actually, because with Open Studio with Mrs. Robert, Logan actually came home. He's like, no, they are talking about safety, and that's like one of the things is because he had some fear-based issues. So his anxiety, of course, not having like a centered set of safety rules, and he was really excited that was like the first thing they were going to be discussing. So I think out of anyone, Tina's got a really great handle on that as well.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that on behalf of the teachers, to your point, Jamie, and also to Lindsay's, Open Studio doesn't mean lack of supervision or lack of adherence to safety protocols. I think what it really is kind of hitting at is that it's going outside the standard curriculum, and beyond that, it's allowing them to combine things from different like shops and settings, which may be something that like the regular master schedule doesn't necessarily lend itself to. And once again, as we talk about how this might look in the future in a lot of classes, it's a great model they're trying to show for others. But yeah, good point on that.
Okay, we have other updates, but
No, I don't.
see the folder's closed. so
I
that
don't.
doesn't mean we
I
have any more.
talked too long before, and I apologize.
Okay, and number 8, staff reports. Part A is actually an achievement update for the board and the community on the SBACs, the NGSS, the SAT results for 2021-22, and other comparisons. Stephanie Florado?
Yes. All right, so I'm going to talk to you about the 3 assessments that were taken last year. So this is all 2021-2022 data. So to start, just to share some state trends that were reported in late August, they reported that results from the 21-22 school year are showing some improvement, but there are still some signs of, lags from pre-COVID levels. And, last year, most schools were back to the regular in-person, remote learning was kind of off the table at that point. However, we were still dealing with a lot of learners and staff members getting sick. And so obviously there were a lot of quarantines, there was still isolations, which obviously disrupts the learning environment. So all of those things are to keep in mind as, we're going through the data. So the state did come out with a pandemic recovery dashboard this year that kind of takes the data from the 2018-2019 school year and compares it to the 21-22 school year to kind of show where each school district performed pre-COVID and post-COVID. They use what they call a performance index, which basically takes the scores of all of the data from SBAC, NGSS, and SAT, puts them on a common scale and comes up with an average. And so that's the number you're going to see on this slide. So to kind of break those numbers down for you, in mathematics, our performance index in 18-19 was 70.5, and last school year it was 63. So that kind of shows you those pre-pandemic performance levels versus where we were last year. In ELA, 75.2, 2018-2019, and 70.2 last year. And then in science, we made a little bit slight improvement, kind of stayed the same, 73.9 in 2018-2019 to 74.2. So again, that just compares right before the pandemic to last school year. So specifically going into SBAC assessments, SBAC is administered once in May. It measures learner progress at the end of the school year. Learners take the English language arts assessment and then the math assessment. And up there, you'll see the different claims that are focused upon within those assessments. This is a breakdown of cohorts from 2015, 2016, all the way up until 21, 22. So you can kind of see how each cohort is performing, and this is for mathematics specifically. So again, we're still falling a bit behind. We're working towards making improvements. 2019, 2020, there was no assessment because that was the year that we went into, distance learning and all that. 2021, the learners did take SBAC, however, the state didn't use that data. And then the most recent data that they are using are from last school year. So this is just a breakdown for math. And then this slide, I'm sorry about all, I tried to fit them all in, but I want to do a million slides for you. But these are the breakdown of our general education learners scores for math, special education learners, and our multi-language learners to kind of give you an idea as of how the breakdown from level 1, level 2, level 3, and level 4, and it compares data from 2017, 2018, all the way up till last school year. So, if you know there are some inconsistencies, 2020 to 2021 in our general education learners, we do see a decrease from our level 1, and we see an increase in our level 2, which is good. Our special education learners for this, we see, a slight decline in our level 1 scores, and our level 2 did go up. Our multi-language learners, unfortunately, we did have some learners scoring more in the level 1 category than we do in our level 2. And unfortunately, there was none in level 3 and level 4 last year.
Can I just ask, how many students do we have in the multi-language?
So I don't know if we know this year, but last year there were 10. Okay. So last year, the number that was here were 10, but I'm not sure if that's the same this year. If we know
The number next to does that correspond to the 2021, 2022, and there's a 10 next to it? That corresponds to how many learners?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
There were
How many
8
are
in 2021, 4 in 18, 19, and 2 in 2017 to 18.
Currently, the director for multi-language learners I spoke with yesterday, and she said there are currently 20 in the district. But that does include those who have been exited from the program, but still need to be tracked for 2 years post being exited from the program.
And I think you all know, even if you're not like statisticians, which none of us are, when numbers get very small, the percentages are a
Right,
little
that's
less,
why I was
less
asking.
meaningful.
Right,
Is that
that's
why- I
why I
thought
was-
that's why you were.
That's why I
asking.
was asking.
In fact,
Yeah.
you know, in some reporting systems, you don't even report by percentage if the number is below a certain threshold, and that's to kind of protect the identity of the individual learners. Because again, if you have 10, a swing of 1 can make it look a lot more dramatic, to the positive or to the negative.
And especially as the numbers change for each year, they go up. Some of these may be new students that are just in the district as well.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
And then you're going to see 2 very similar slides for our ELA scores. So again, this is a breakdown by our cohorts to kind of show you where they were in 2015, 2016, all the way up to this past school year.
I do remember in the past when we have gotten reports that as we go on and we look at math, it always appeared as though the math drop off was greater than the language arts, even during the more critical times.
Yeah. And I will say one disadvantage during remote learning and learners being home and not being here is math has become a very hands-on content area. And so one thing that is very difficult when they're not here with us in school is they miss out on that opportunity to really work with their hands, and you know, it's very difficult. And so hopefully with having everybody back and moving more towards regular times, we can start to work on those as well.
Not to interrupt, but when you're done, one of the questions that I would be asking is what specifically is being done to address these drops in both ELA as well as in math this year?
Absolutely. You want me to wait until the end?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Go ahead. I just wanted to put it out there so I don't forget.
Thank you. And then here are the same kind of graphs where it breaks the data down between our general education learners, our learners that are in special education, and our multi-language learners. So I'll leave this up for a bit, let you take a look at those charts. Ask any questions that you have. I'm sorry about the tiny little numbers. It was hard to make
So
bigger.
I think that it may be beneficial for us in the future to have that, the also disaggregated data for students who are eligible for free or reduced lunch.
Yes.
I mean, I know that high needs category is just such a, it's not actionable data, right? But our numbers, there's a 20-point difference between kids in the high needs groups and their typical peers. And so kind of going to part of Lucy's question was, do these scores correlate with like the district benchmark assessment data?
Yes, they do. So when I looked at the benchmark data from last school year, I mean, one thing that was very evident was that there were improvements shown from each assessment. So they take it in September, in December, and again in March, I believe. So there definitely were improvements shown, but then when you look at that final data point from iReady in March, it is very much aligned to what you see here.
Thank you.
Okay, so then the NGSS assessment, which is our science assessment that our 5th graders, 8th graders, and 11th graders take. This is a breakdown of the data for last school year. So, you know, this is an assessment that hasn't been around for too long. One thing about the science I will say is that it is exploratory, something to think about, you know, during the pandemic, during distance learning. Even though some of what they're doing is hands-on, they do still have a lot of those experiments that available to them through videos. You know, there's a lot more collaboration, there's a lot more inquiry. And so that might be why you see the data this way and thinking about math, because I know a lot of us, when we look at science data, we sometimes think about the math data. But these are just the levels broken down by grade level. Stop for a minute and
It's interesting to see the 11th grade at the level 3, how high they are compared to the 5th grade. But then that's the first year they take the test anyway.
It is.
So that makes a difference too. Yeah, they have to get used to the format.
Yes. And I will say, if no one has ever seen the practice test for the NGSS assessment or for any of these, they could be very tricky, very, very tricky. I mean, you really have to pay very close attention to detail. And that's, it's tough. They're very tough assessments. There's a lot of reading involved. They're difficult. So kudos to the learners for sitting through them and taking them and, you know. And then finally, the SAT assessment data. So this gives you the district performance history from 2016 all the way up to 2022. I will say that, wrote it down on this one, the goal, and the goals are on the next one. The goal for ELA for the state is, or for the SAT is 480. So if you see, we did surpass that. The goal for math, however, was 530. So we fell just below that. So very close, hitting those goals. But this gives you a breakdown of the last few years. Again, you don't see 2020 data in there, 2021. And then to kind of give you an idea in terms of how we did with the SAT in comparison to some other districts that are in our DERG. This one is ELA. And then this one is math.
How were these particular districts chosen in our DERG? Because this is not all of them.
So
There are
that
others.
the DERG thing is hard because the state isn't really using the DERGs anymore.
I know, I know.
So, and to be honest, one thing that I will say is that the data, these charts that you're seeing, there's somebody that we have in district that develops these using all the data that we have. So that is one thing that I personally, I don't know why these were chosen and others were not.
Yeah, I'm kind of shocked to not see HK on there.
I know. That's what I'm
because I
thinking.
can say
I
it.
didn't want to say it, but
I always
that's
look for HK, yeah.
HK and that's.
The DERs are not highlighted anymore
Region
because it shows the
17.
disparity between districts.
Right.
And that's not what we want.
Right.
Cities versus no.
Region 13 are very similar, very similar.
Well, I will,
That's what I was looking.
I will figure that out for you because that's a good question for me to know too.
Did you want to say something? Well,
I think it says it on here, if I'm reading it correctly, it says districts with high needs populations of 31% to roughly 34%. So I think that's how those districts were chosen.
For high
Okay,
needs,
so
that's what I
then-
was thinking when I read that. Yeah, and that's
So then
part of
they
the
must
question that
have-
you had, Linda, too, about separating them out. And they are in these particular graphs.
yeah, thanks for pointing that. I mean, that is a single point of comparison. It's probably not the only point of comparison
Right.
that would be valid, but
So that is the end of this very brief data presentation. And then your question. So I think, one thing to keep in mind is that, we do have our coaches and we've now made our coaches, they're more of instructional coaches than they are content specific coaches. And so those coaches are continuing to push into those classrooms to help support the teachers. I think another thing to point out is that we do have, some of our, we have a consultant, a good consultant. She's math specific, that we have kind of been putting her in contact with some of the math teachers in our district. to work with them on bringing more performance tasks into the classroom, bringing more discussions in the classroom in terms of, look fors and notice and wonders, things like that. I don't know if there's anything else specific, that we can speak of.
I just have a quick question. That consultant for mathematics, do they have a focus in special ed as well? Because the special ed does not meet was seemingly high and didn't really have much change with pre and post COVID. It was high even before.
Yes, so this specific consultant was actually, she was a math department chair and then the math coordinator for Glastonbury Public Schools. She's very good at what she does, and she has a lot of experience with different learners from different backgrounds. And she does a good job. The only thing that she says that's difficult is that she's no longer here in Connecticut. So one thing that her and I have talked about is finding a way to help her connect with the coaches, to allow them to kind of go in and see the work that's being done in the classroom, and then to give her feedback so that she can continue to personalize what she's helping the math teachers with, since she can't physically come here and see it herself. But she does have a really unique background. She's got a lot of experience. She's very good at what she does. And to my understanding, she's been working with the teachers for a couple of years now.
What happens to students that have had a significant decline, whether it be in ELA or mathematics? Have they been identified and have teachers or these coaches been targeting these kids, or are they kind of just hanging in limbo if they don't go out and advocate for themselves?
No, so what happens is after the assessments, benchmark assessments are taken, the coaches, the teachers will kind of look at that data to figure out which learners are struggling. Then in that place, you kind of look at intervention and see if the child is an intervention or is not an intervention. And if the child is not an intervention, then that's kind of when we start to talk about the supports that are needed for that child. So it's definitely, the data is used to make sure that the learners do not fall behind and that we are putting plans in place and making sure that they're supported and we help them to make improvement.
And who sets the SAT goal?
That's the state of Connecticut, or that's not the state of, I'm sorry, not the state of Connecticut. That would be the, it's the SAT board. The SAT board.
College board.
Yes, the college board.
I just wanted to reiterate what you guys just said. So I know that the coaches, you said you guys rely heavily on the coaching. How many do we have in each school at this time?
So we have one coach at each of the elementary schools. We have two coaches at Strong, and then we have a learner-centered coach that kind of supports all of those coaches.
Okay, and that's for ELA and math, or are they just ELA?
They're both. So
both.
now we consider our coaches to be instructional coaches. So they focus on all, and I think part of that, thinking about the reimagining and bringing in reimagining, one of our goals is to really bring more cross-disciplinary activities, lessons into the classrooms. And so if our coaches were just to focus on specific content areas, that might not allow for more of that collaboration to happen. So I think that was the goal there when we
Yeah, and if I could also add to that, and I won't put Noelle on the spot, but she's a coach who became a principal, and so we went to our leadership team this summer, and especially our elementary principals, and we kind of asked them how the model had been working, because the model in the past, for those of you that aren't familiar, assigned coaches by either math or ELA, but as a result, they had to split schools. And there was some discontinuity, as I understand it, about that splitting. And so with the principals, I'm not saying Noelle made this decision unilaterally, but she was very influential, having come, like, the idea of being able to have one coach focus on a school to support a group of teachers, to support a group of learners, and to work directly with a principal every day. Again, maybe the jury's still out, but that was the consensus of the group. But it is a change from how we did things before, where it was more split by content area. But to Stephanie's point, I think the idea is The coaching is to really support teachers in all aspects of their work and not to be so narrow as to just, I'm coaching on this content area. By contrast, we have interventionists that are split for math and ELA, and those have existed to stay. Do you want to add anything to that? You're just sitting there, and I apologize, but I mean, can you at least concur with what I said? And yeah, and is it working? You've seen it from both sides. I mean,
Yes, I think that there are huge advantages to being in one building consistently. I think that to say that your work is specific to a content area as a coach isn't true, because there are certain instructional strategies and practices that are just good practices regardless of the content you're teaching. So by having a coach in a building consistently, you're able to get into classrooms on a more routine basis and be part of that community and that culture, as opposed to when you're shared between buildings. I felt like last year I did a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. And having been at one building prior to that, pre-pandemic, I felt like I could help and support across disciplines a little bit more and support teachers in general, by being at one building versus being split. And just so many of the instructional practices, like I said, just coincide because they're good practice.
And with that said, so we do have a specific math consultant though.
We have,
But is someone who cannot physically be in our building, which kind of defeats the purpose, I feel.
it does and it does. So far the feedback that I've gotten, because one thing that I do with all of the consultants that we have in district is I go to the teachers that are working directly with the consultant to get feedback to see whether or not it's worth continuing the partnership with this consultant. And I will say that the teachers that have worked with this consultant have all sung her praises and have said that she's really helped them to develop more creative things to bring into their classroom. And so again, that downfall, which the consultant was very open when I had a conversation with her, and she specified, I'm not sure how beneficial I'm going to be to those teachers because of the fact that she can't come in and observe and see the work in progress. But that's kind of where we sat down with the coaches, we sat down with the teachers, and we really had those conversations to make sure that they were giving us that feedback, so that we can give her that feedback to let her know what was working, what isn't working, so that she can then go back to the drawing board, continue to work with them. She's really into wanting to help these teachers in any way that she can. And she doesn't want to waste anybody's time. So she's been very open about all of that.
I may have missed it, but how many are at Coggins?
How many math teachers?
How many coaches?
There's no coaches at Coggins.
Or intervention?
No
Why?
intervention either.
So
Why?
that's when most of these.
that predates our time here.
Yeah.
I think the best answer I could give you based is that the high schools have department heads who get release periods and are much more available. The elementary world does not have that benefit, but I mean, we could. There's no reason that we can't. It's just historically we haven't done that. I think Noel wanted to say
Yes, the
something.
coaching model has been elementary and middle school that we've done. I know that there had been talk at some point in time, well, pre-COVID, right, about changing that model and having some of the like team leaders, I think that's what they're called at the high school or something, like department chairs, kind of be taking on that instructional coaching role too. But then to also share to Maura's point, the consultant, I believe, has only done work in grades 6 through 12.
So I think 5 through 12.
That maybe. So I think when we think about it being like content specific, that was all up in the upper grades where it is more content specific as opposed to the elementary model where it is more interdisciplinary in nature.
And I guess like my questions is just, I feel for the staff, especially coming from the pandemic and seeing the numbers, which is why I requested to see them. I feel like they need to have as much support as possible, and coaching's great, but coaching only can go so far because it's the working with the kids that the teachers need help with. And catching them up to where they missed. And I feel that that has to be priority. And I'm not sure, I don't mean to put you two on the spot, but I just wondered, I know there's a lot about reimagining education in the future, and it's fabulous, and I've talked to Doug about this many times, but who is currently in charge of overseeing the curriculum right now? We're kind of working as a team to look into that. And I will say that to speak to there not being any coaches here, I do work closely with the team leaders. I do meet with them, and we kind of talk about what supports they need. One of the things that we've done with some of our professional learning days this year that we're going to do again on November 8th is to kind of give the teachers the autonomy to figure out how they want to spend that time, what's best for them. And I have made it very clear that if they need any help finding resources, if they need any help reaching out to anybody, that I can be that pinpoint person to help them out with that stuff. Because I do know that they don't have the coaches here like the elementary schools do. But like Noelle had said, there's a lot more consultants that have been hired to work within the high school than there have been at the elementary level.
I mean, believe me when I say this, I truly believe it's no fault of the teachers. I understand that. But you do have students that have had difficulties because of the pandemic and not having that hands-on you spoke about that are struggling.
Right.
And if we don't have those coaches and we don't have people in place to identify these kids and they fall behind, catching up in math is not easy.
Right.
And I have a student that does that. So it is concerning to me that we're not having somebody that is keying in on these kids to get them to where they need to be. I'm not saying excel, but at least getting to where they need to be. So I think that's extremely important. I think that's something we need to really focus on.
Yep. In the district, we are using the iReady diagnostic, and the iReady diagnostic does give we are paying for the subscriptions for the learning paths, which do then focus on the specific areas that each student is missing to help them excel in those areas specifically.
Also, I want to recognize and commend the leadership for the fact that the first response was a systemic response, right? That, all of the data and the research is showing that the way to make up for the lag is to focus on grade level standards, to prioritize those standards. And when you find a gap on an individual or a small group, then you deal with that one little piece of gap and then you bring them right back in. So like I said, I love the fact that your first response to what are we doing for that lag is a systemic one. And it sounds like the steps are being taken to help address the you want to call it, I don't like the deficit thinking of calling it a learning loss, but to help our students, our learners, get up to grade level. So I just wanted to recognize that and say, excellent, that we're focusing on a systemic approach.
Can I just ask one more thing? Maybe this is a silly question, but so can you just let me or inform me of so what does coaching look like exactly? They're finding teachers free time to coach the teachers on how to better inform.
Just come up to the table. and
So-
let them know.
Yeah,
You know,
no,
all your colleagues abandoned them. All the
I
other-
can give a little
All my
bit.
favorite things.
I can give a little bit. No, I'll give more.
I just want to say before we continue, as this continues, there's no reason why we cannot continue this discussion, which I'm planning on doing at our next meeting as well, to expand on it. So just keep that in mind.
So with the coaching model, when I was in the coaching model for the 5 years, every single year it looked a little different. We did work to write a coaching vision for the district, and we came together collaboratively across the district to say what that vision was. However, we started in one trajectory, then the pandemic hit and we all became remote learning teachers for the year. And then the year after the pandemic, we went to being split between schools. So it's really hard to say what the vision is right now. I think what we're trying to get back to as a district is that it is also decided upon by the needs at each school. So we're letting the teachers guide where they currently are right now, because we don't really know. We've never experienced this before, right? So they're kind of guiding where they're going with their learning. And I know that when I meet with the instructional coach at Memorial every week, we discuss what we need to look at for the data. And then what we've also done is worked alongside our literacy specialist, Kristen Allen, where we've noticed some areas from the benchmark data to say, we need to hone in a little bit more. For example, our fourth graders that were probably had some significant gaps in learning, phonics, phonological awareness. And then she's created some baseline assessments that we've been able to use and then target our instruction. And the coach is then pushing in, and I know this is also happening at Lyman too, at the elementary schools where they've lost a lot of those foundational skills due to the pandemic, and we need to address that. So where we currently used to have like our curriculum, or where we had our curriculum map, and we would say kind of this is where we're going, we've had to re-envision that a little bit, and then the coaches are taking the lead on that to say, here are some formative assessments that we can use based on our diagnostic and benchmark data from iReady to address those areas. And then during PLCs, the professional learning communities, the coaches and the teachers meet together and look at that data, then decide on some resources to guide instruction. And then the coaches have gone in and modeled it with the teachers and also figured out what would be good whole group instruction, what would be good strategic group instruction, what's some one-on-one instruction. So it's much more personalized right now than I've ever seen it.
Very good. I don't believe we have any more questions.
You can stay there now, Ellen. if you
I'm
want.
all good. I'm
Like I
gonna
said,
put
all
you back
your
there. It was really
colleague
nice.
principals and
I mean, it was
like an
super
hour.
exciting, but I'm gonna go back
Thank
there.
you. Before we move on to item C, 8C, security program update, does anyone want to have like about a 5-minute break? Or should we just continue?
Power through.
Plow through? Okay, security program update, Ken, and thank you so much for the outline, it's awesome.
All right, so, yep, so I'm gonna start with the page about the anonymous reporting app. So we've got 2 that we vetted, that seem to be kind of rising, as we did our research. Say Something, which is backed by the Sandy Hook Promise, and Anonymous Alerts. Both have 2-way communication for anonymous alerting of bullying and suicide, mental, anything, you know. And the 2-way communication is key because the initial report may not be detailed enough. The anonymous alerts has anonymity both ways. So the person making the report and the staff member from our district would just appear anonymous and no one knows, hey, I'm Mrs. So-and-so that's, you know, taking your report. Whereas they Say Something, everything's done by their own professional staff. And where we would be working in the district with anonymous alerts, the Say Something staff would be working all the reports and then would alert us if they felt something needed action. The anonymous alerts does allow us, or the community, it's not just for, you know, the district, but anyone can report to both through cell phone, app, or website. So lots of methods of communication and reporting there. But the anonymous alerts is processed by us. So it would be a team of, you know, our choosing to process these in a timely manner, vet them, decide, you know, what action needs to be taken place. Say Something, their staff does this, and they whittle it down. We'll get a report, and you can go look up, you know, anything that's non-emergent, immediate threats. They classify everything as life safety or non-life safety. Let's Say Something, and they're going to call 911 and district personnel that we would have to designate 365, 24/7. So that means us staffing on call if we were to go with this app to take that. Whereas in anonymous alerts, since we'd be working on ourselves, we can designate off hours, and this app would not collect a report, but it would tell them, said, hey, you're trying to reach out off hours, but here are resources of our choosing that you can direct you, and it could direct them to call 911 or a mental health hotline or suicide hotline. So give them an outlet that's not, you know, reporting to us if no one's there staffing up. The Say Something is free. However, they are so backlogged that the earliest we would be able to onboard with them if we chose to would be the 23-24 school year. And that's not a guarantee. Some districts who are using Say Something are Hartford, Guilford, and Madison. Anonymous alerts does cost year one because there's a one-time setup fee. There's a little over $3,600 with a $3,100 renewal every year after that. And we can join them
whenever we wanted. Other districts using anonymous alerts are in London, Norwalk, Groton, and Newtown. I just see in the digital copy I have provided their promo videos and links to their key features to do a deeper dive. I'll stop there with the anonymous reporting apps and take questions on any of those.
What was, Durham Millfield Youth and Family
Oh,
Services
sorry, I didn't touch on that.
ability?
Because of the after hours or night and weekend component, and wanting the potential for someone to respond, Durham Middlefield Youth Family Services is willing to partner with us to take some of those calls, if we were going to put a time limit on when district staff are responding to them.
Seems ironic that Newtown, that Say Something is through the Sandy Hook group, and yet Newtown is using the other one. I mean, do you have any insight as to?
The information we have on the districts is from these applications. We haven't actually spoken to anyone yet at the other districts to see, why they chose one, or we don't even know if they, did vet the other one yet.
It's my understanding that we're looking into these apps to give students an opportunity to be able to anonymously, when I say anonymously, meaning that they can do it privately, not necessarily that they're not going to include their names on it. Any incidences that happen, and they could be just, bullying incidences that I shouldn't say just, but they could be, that's what I'm thinking of. A lot of the little bullying incidences that happen that can become major, not necessarily 911 types of incidences and all. And are these both going to fit those types of reports? When I look at Say Something, they have a specific group, and then they decide whether it's non-life threatening. I mean, how long is it going to take for the school district to be made aware of these incidences? Because they're usually things that happen, and some of them may need to be addressed more quickly.
So Say Something staffs themselves, and something I didn't highlight on is they actually do also provide training 6 through 12 to staff and students on how to identify emerging issues. Also, so to help people make an informed report if necessary. But Say Something's team vets everything within minutes of getting something, a report, and their trained teams will whittle that through and they pass it on to the school district. What they feel is credible, but there is the ability for anyone in the district on the platform to go see everything that has been reported. Whereas if we were doing anonymous alerts, it would be the heavy lift is on our personnel to act accordingly. We would have to put together teams within our schools to receive these alerts, school-based, grade level based. And they'd have to act on these in a timely manner during their, as part of their duties. And that may have to come with shifting some of their duties in other areas, or potentially could run into staff, additional staffing changes.
And I do think from Linda, from what you said with Newtown, I can't quote it specifically, but I believe that Newtown ended up going to this direction because they wanted more control over what was being reported and how their district could look through it, because it's Say Something app is through their personnel. So I think that's why maybe that shifted, even though one started before the other. I'm wondering about, even though Durham Youth and Family Services, it's not a district organization, it's actually funded by Durham and Middlefield, if that's compliant for them to be able to partner on that. Is that?
I know both apps are FERPA compliant, but I'm not sure what ramifications would be of their involvement. Something perhaps Kim can speak to next time. She's the one who engaged them.
I figured if I just said it, Kim we'll hear it eventually. But
Well,
it just
I
makes
don't know
me-
if you're making this point either, but if their involvement was going to be significant staff time, and the taxpayers are funding that through a different funding stream.
Right,
It's
that's kind of where it's going with that.
it's kind of that we're adding to the town's budgets or the district's budget if additional staff is needed. And I don't think this would come up, but there's also the potential, depending on how we would staff it, to even having to go into our bargaining agreements if
Right.
If this was gonna have like an after hours element for, say, counselors or psychologists or folks that we feel like might have the training in district to really do the type of threat assessments or things that would be necessary for the,
My concern
yeah.
on that one, just is that we could be receiving confidential district information and having that through Durham Youth and Family Services, their staff. So I know we're looking, like, there's so much here, like, I can't thank you guys enough for looking all through this. I'm wondering if there's not a simpler solution. Because I know, like, I feel like this is how we went through it with remote public comment. We looked at some extensive ways of doing things and expensive ways of doing things, and we found a way that was, thanks to Ken and IT in the district, we've been able to do that for free. I'm wondering if, as a board, we can dig into this, maybe everyone look through it and see if there's another option that allows us to, for kids and for students, parents and community, to report things without having so much 24/7, 365 of someone reporting something. I think what most parents and most people want to get at is what's going on in our district. So maybe emergent complaints isn't something that we should be feeling through this, but we're asking for daily complaints of things that are happening or how we can improve daily. I'm worried this is more going towards like a hotline as opposed to try and get to the bottom of the data of what's going on in our schools.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think I'd be curious to see what the efficacy of these is compared to calling 211 or 911, right? Who would be more like, would our families be more likely to do this versus when there's a real need calling using 211 or 911? But like you said, it feels like we're putting an extra layer on top.
You know, it might be confusing it more than we need to. I know that we're trying to get away from having a child feel uncomfortable going and getting a bullying report or a parent pulling one from the office. I just think we need to think more simple.
well, if that's the primary goal, then these might be kind of exceeding that. I think.
I
it's
think
very-
they're
it's
great.
very
I do think that has
clear.
its place, but I think.
Yeah, I think it's very clear what these are trying to do is prevent big events.
Right.
The suicides, the shootings, all those things that we hope would never happen here. And it's almost recognizing that if people are willing to report something that they're not sure if it's a big deal or not, that typically hasn't happened in the after action reports of some of these horrific events. And that is very different from what you're talking about with kind of the day-to-day things, which
But I think
to
we
Ken's
can-
point, those
right.
could escalate and lead to
But I
these
do
things.
think in a more simpler plan, we can still catch those things, those early bullying that is leading kids to not, wanting to harm themselves or harm other people. I just think we need to think more simple.
I think it also takes the role of the principal out of the picture, who's the decision maker on whether or not this gets dealt with. I mean, if there's an issue with the bullying or discrimination, it's the principal that has the responsibility to take action. And this eliminates that person in this process.
So you're saying because they have the skilled crisis counselors, that they're the
Yeah,
ones weeding it out?
Yeah. And then, we're responsible for disciplinary actions, not them. And so
But I'd argue at the middle school level with the amount of work that Steve Fitzgerald does and what Cheryl does, I know that's a lot of work, but I do think that they manage to really investigate and go through things.
I'm not saying I agree with
If
that.
they know, and it's the
Yeah.
knowing part that we're looking into, how do we get them to know?
Yeah,
How do we
I
get
mean,
the
I think
students?
the real issue is, if the kid's afraid to drop
Right.
off, my kid sitting next to me is
Right.
making threats against the girl next door. What do I
Right.
do? And doesn't want to walk down to the principal. We
Yeah.
wanted to create a system where they could do it online to get to the principal.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
And I think these go way beyond that right now.
Yeah.
And
Feeling the same way. Yep. Any other thoughts?
I think if we were Hartford, these would be good.
Yeah.
Because there's other issues with, you know, a lot more shootings and stuff like that, but we're not. Hopefully, we're not at that stage and stuff.
No, I mean, we heard the students who come before us say very loud and clear, they want to be able to get us that information about things that are happening. And how are we going to get that to the principals, to those who are going to address it in a timely manner?
Well, the only
Not
issue with
through a
that
whole-
is that if they want to remain anonymous, and I think that is
Well,
the
that's the
only
piece.
part of it that that's the only
piece that we're
part
trying
that
to
I think
address,
is,
the
right,
anonymous.
that's the only part. So if we could find a way to make it, what's that?
So you can do that with a Google form.
Right, so that's what we're gonna get at. There's ways of doing that. I mean, our policy, I was just, we were just talking about, policy is a 30-page policy. I mean, our bullying policy is pretty extensive. And it has forms, and you don't have to put your name to the form and submit it. But it's gotta be done in a way where the child feels safe, or the learner feels safe to do that. So, I mean, if that is the only
Right.
part of it, then we have to find a way to make that possible for them. Right? Because I think the rest of it, to be quite honest with you, we have a pretty extensive bullying policy. I think we really do. And it's just a matter of making sure that the child feels comfortable
Right,
doing it.
right. That was the point of all this.
So I think there's ways to do it.
But thank you. I appreciate all this. I mean, at least we know, we understand. So,
I also want to, because it's just unfortunately who I am, I do want to point out that like there haven't been school shootings in Hartford, right? It is communities like ours where often those students feel so helpless that they do something like that. Like it's not, school shootings are not an urban problem. They are a suburban rural problem. And also interestingly, Madison, right? Madison and Hartford use the same one, which I find, Madison's one of the.
Yeah, Madison just started, I mean, that's where it had originally come from when I was looking at them and that app, because Madison had so much on their website about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is interesting.
okay, I think we're going to be having a further discussion on this. So, and bring it up again at our next meeting and see where we are. what
Yeah, we
come
could
up
add it
with.
to
If you
next
think of
meeting.
something too that might work with the students. You've been very creative in the past. And so we'll continue to think about it. Let's move on to the emergency.
Okay, so the emergency apps, the one mutual link that has the heavy price tag is, from what we can tell, the only thing out there right now that can take all our various security systems, the camera system, the door security system, radios, an intrusion alarm, fire, and hold them all together in the time of an emergency. It's the state police are now onboarded with them, and they have proprietary hardware and software that will take any system, they're vendor agnostic, and tie it in an emergency event that can be triggered either with a manual button, like panic buttons that can be installed. There's an app for that for people to report, and we can trigger it, ourselves if we see something. With this hardware and software, if we had to trigger an event, and this doesn't have to always be an emergency, we can use this for drills as well. And that goes with the training aspect, so that you're always up to speed on how to use the system. Hopefully, you don't never have to use it for an emergency, but you're familiar with it for that. It would open up a case with first responders. They would have immediate access. They'd be granted access at that time with triggering an event, which could be, like I said, a voting button, monitor, alarms, anything going out to them. And tie in our systems, they'd have immediate access to our cameras. If they needed to enter our buildings, they could unlock our doors because we'd be in a lockdown at that standpoint or at that point. They'd be tied into our radios. So not constantly, but they have the ability to toggle between their own first responders, their own radios, and talk to us to get information on what could be seen. You could even be invited in the middle of an incident to join it with a cell phone, and your camera can be used to help if someone's inside the building. there's no other product that we've seen so far, not saying this is the only one, but that we found that can take all the various systems that we have in place and make it work, make it, you know, in a user-friendly manner for our first responders, because, you know, the state police and other towns will be coming in, and you know, they're not all going to be familiar with all the different flavors of video systems, all the different flavors of door access control. They might even not be able to get to certain doors that are where they're used to getting to, and this could unlock a certain door for them to get in and away from something else. So, but like I said, it does come with a heavy price tag to do this. There's Plainville just onboarded with them, and I'm trying to set up a site visit to see how that is. They are very willing to come talk to anyone, give a presentation to the Board of Ed. Most of these state colleges and the Connecticut State Police, like I said, are all on board with them. The other two apps, Warnable and Catapult EMS, they would be used in conjunction with something like Mutual Link. They would be our district emergency management software, have our crisis plans, have our reunification plans, and they've been used simultaneously to gather information on, you know, you could, if a teacher's on it, hey, I'm in this classroom and I have these students with me, they're in my class, but I also have these, help us head count from the district management level and let the first responders do what they need to do. And it would go beyond an incident where it could also help, like I said, with the reunification and everything after first responders are done. And come with a significantly less, significant, you know, lesser price tag because there aren't hardware based, they are just software.
So these can be used.
Warnable and
independent.
Catapult, if we went with them, and there's plenty others that we're starting to find, are software management platforms the district would be using during an event while the first responders are doing their thing. So it would potentially be in addition to Mutual Link. We wouldn't necessarily have to have Mutual Link. They do some things that Mutual Link doesn't.
But they wouldn't be standalone. Are you saying there wouldn't be standalone apps?
Yeah, these would be standalone
Okay.
apps. These would not necessarily tie into Mutual Link. That will take our hardware and our physical
If we want.
devices.
If we want to be Mutual.
Yes, if you want to
just have the Warnable.
Yep, could just have Warnable, could just have a Catapult, but that the only, I won't say downside, but the only thing missing is that immediate tie-in to first responders. For instance, you know, me and my team are well-versed on the camera system.
Mhm.
If we're in a lockdown, nobody's having effective access to a camera system. Warnable, Catapult, they're not tying into anything.
Right.
They're just software platforms for us to account for students and communicate with teachers and staff during an incident. So that's the biggest, you know, easiest way I can explain the two differences.
Has our SRO taken a look at any of these and
That's what I was gonna ask.
really?
He's looked at Mutual Link with us.
Yeah.
And that's everything that in my conversations I've had with him and Demas and other things is they my inkling is they prefer something of the Mutual Link type because they care about getting information and getting into our buildings and responding as quick as possible. These other apps would be an effective tool, but they're not geared toward that, you know, first 2 to 5 minutes reaction of who's going on site. They're the longevity during and after an event.
Who's the alarm company?
It's American Alarm.
And there's no panic buttons now?
There's some in the front offices, but no soft buttons, no app based. And we're working on, but it's not up to speed yet. Some of our newer radios have programmable buttons that can trigger like a panic button. Technical kinks that I know facilities and the alarm company are working on.
And do you know how much is left in our security budget?
I don't know the overall security budget. I only know the money that I have for, you know, my plan software, which wouldn't cover this, but I believe Kim said, and I don't want to speak for her, that some of the grants out there could potentially cover this.
We've been denied every single grant we applied for.
Related to this or
Related to
related?
school
Okay.
safety.
Um,
I just asked him, we do not meet the standard.
We had,
basically.
we had a security budget that we decided not to do, some door hardening, and we had some savings in that. I just wondered.
We
how
don't know
much-
what the balance is. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's like.
I know Kim has those figures, I just don't have them for you. And the grants are usually reimbursement grants, you'd have to pay for these anyway.
You might remember about 4 years ago, there was Connecticut State Police did a safety assessment in all of our locations. I wonder if we're accessing that information. There was a free service they did. I remember it was, remember they had a convention at Corn School and I don't know where that information is, but it might be helpful maybe in making
That
decisions.
did
about
inform a
your-
lot of what
we have somebody
facilities
here that can
and
help too.
security, my department did with expanding door access control, video cameras.
Oh, like the
things like
numbering in the rooms and the color code.
Yeah, the outside, all the doors are numbered.
And I do have to say, it's a pretty sore spot for me after being at, our Cape conference. Lucy and Mariah and I were there. To hear that the state feels that we, as a district, are not eligible for those grants, makes me really mad, because what says that our schools need to be any less safe? When just what Linda just said, that some districts, some schools, some towns are these rural towns that are having these school shootings. So it is something that, I'm working with CAVE on, to talk to the legislation and, through CAVE advocate for that. It's frustrating. It's, it shouldn't be that way, but we have to deal with what we have. And
Well, these numbers are crazy anyway. We've done this American. I gotta be honest with you, this conversation probably shouldn't be a public conversation, to be quite honest. So in my opinion, my professional opinion would be is that these are probably the kind of conversations that we should have offline, especially when it comes to the school safety and how we do certain things within the schools. But I do appreciate all your efforts on this, and there's gonna be a reason why the state police wants a certain number of things their way, because they aren't linked with it. And that's understandable, and they are our first responders here, but you are gonna get surrounding agencies that are gonna assist, so. I honestly, I think we should probably table this to a private work session, if anything. I don't think it'd be something that we should be talking about in the public, to be quite honest.
If we can do that.
We have done all of that
Certain
previous
criteria.
stuff in executive session.
Yeah.
I did look in our capital reserve fund, and there is a line item for security upgrades, but there's no balance in it. So I'm not sure.
But I appreciate
Okay.
all your efforts on that.
And so other than
Thank you.
these apps by name, I haven't specifically named any of the other.
We have a few
programs.
too that I'll share with you as well.
Okay, moving on to item number 9, new business, part A for a vote. At the board's September 28th work session, the board reviewed the history of the district's reconfiguration efforts and discussed next steps. There was unanimous consensus of the members present to research a new reconfiguration plan. It was agreed to officially vote to authorize the district to gather information on a feasibility plan for this reconfiguration at this particular meeting. Were you able to get? Yeah. Okay, I would like to get more on as well. Unfortunately, we had to leave. Because at this point in time, we'd be looking for a motion, and I'll read the motion and we can get more.
it really doesn't make sense in this chair. So I'll just leave it.
I know that it's like, there's no Wi-Fi
So
here.
it's like
It's
that.
nothing that's- disappears.
Only my chair doesn't get
Little something
All
over
the
your
calls
head.
you would have gotten. Might be the cloud over there. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm gonna move on to new business B at the moment, which is to vote to approve an appointment, the appointment of John Stone. We don't have, because of the changes in the board, we don't have a board member on our finance committee. So I would like to appoint Jason to the finance committee, and I would like a vote of the board to approve that appointment.
Second.
Oh, was that Lindsay? And second, okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Okay. Welcome aboard. And, services. Can't get her. Okay, so, anyway, so we agreed to officially vote to authorize the district to gather information on a feasibility plan for the this reconfiguration at our October 12th meeting. So I'm looking for a motion to authorize the staff to gather information related to a potential school facility utilization reconfiguration that would expand, renovate and or renovate Memorial School to serve all learners in grades K through 5, repurpose Brewster Elementary School, and to close John Lyman Elementary School. So I need to have someone make that motion.
I will make that motion.
So it's Lindsay and a second.
Second.
Second by John.
Any discussion?
Any discussion?
Is that gonna evaluate the cost of doing this?
That's what the study would be doing, yes.
I mean, we have looked at in the past to renovate corn into actually rebuild $42 million. And this would make Memorial the largest school with almost 600 and some odd students. And it's, when we looked at putting just the middle field there, it was about a $10 million improvement into Memorial School. And I'm not sure that the community is going to be very supportive of the idea of having a single K-5 was, in the past was the priority, but it was just overruled because of the cost of it. So I'm not sure that it's changed over the years. But we had looked at, $40 million K-5 the corn site 5 years ago or 6 years ago. It just it makes a lot of sense, but it also is so expensive that we it's just hard to understand if the community would be behind that.
So when you're talking about the overruling, I remember that it was the board that never put it forward. It never
Right.
got past the board. So we never really did get community input and at the time.
Yeah.
So it was just basically a board decision. And also, I'm not sure if that $42 million more than likely did not include the state reimbursement, which would be approximately 52.5%.
But the state reimbursement is contingent upon the space available. And since we have 2 schools that are not closed, that goes down as well.
I
So-
think part of our
that's
study, if you
part of the
authorize
study.
this, would
I
be
was just gonna say
to
that.
research that a little
Right.
bit more, and
Yeah.
and that's why.
Yep.
I personally believe this should be a renovation expansion if we do it, and not just an expansion, because. Again, I'm still learning the rules, but this district has not got a lot of state funding for these things in the past, and it seems to me that that is what the state. Is saying it wants to stand behind. Now Lindsay points out, maybe there's something that doesn't help us here too. But we'd like to know that, because I think it would go into not just our kind of thinking, but also what we communicate to the community.
Yeah.
Because I think, if there's a hard and fast rule that says we can't, I think we have to consider that. And if there's one that says that it's more assured, then I think that may tip the scale in the other direction, so to speak.
And I think what we said too during the work session was that we really can't engage the community and really engage each other until we have this information. There's so many moving parts, there's so many buildings, there's so many past issues, future issues, a strategic plan that, rolls into it. What's the best avenue that we're gonna take, and to get that information out, we need the information first. It was a little just because we're in discussion, I can, a little troubling to see, I don't know how many people saw the Milton Press article. But again, it's misinformation that I don't want to happen. I want to be able to have as much information as possible, you know, to see an article in a paper that said, we're voting on closing a school today. Which we're clearly not. We're voting to get information on what is feasible and what is best for our district and on both of our towns. So I'll leave it at that.
And then it goes public. And then it goes to the community. Because right now we don't have anything to present to the community. Any other?
Is there a cost associated with this? Was there like any baseline? I wasn't at the last meeting, so I'm not sure.
That's what we need. We need that information.
Well, I'm saying to get to this point,
Oh, no, Kim
But-
has that information, but.
What do you mean?
Oh, to
the-
go to the study.
essentially how much to do this study.
Oh, you know, we don't have that figure. Do you have?
Do you know about?
No, I
how much
think
was
it's,
the
I don't think we're asking you for a dollar amount tonight, and if you don't want us to start, if that's kind of germane to this, which maybe it is. You know, we could come back the next time or even between meetings and just say, this is about the dollar amounts. I mean, the good news is. We've already paid for the enrollment forecast. That's a huge anchor point. To a lot of this. I think where the cost will come in, and Kim could speak better, but in my experience. The cost would be. Paying a design firm or an architecture firm to do kind of a rough. Estimate of exactly what Bob is asking, like based on the enrollment forecast, based on that being a K-5 school and all the projections. What does the current facility at Memorial, like what can it kind of absorb? What would need to be added into physical space? And then probably a smaller expense would be any other internal renovation to the existing space, and or if like, I could easily say, well, the newer space could be built for the younger learners, so we don't have to backfill the current space with the little bathrooms and all of those things, but that may not be an architect's assessment of that. They might say it makes more sense to build a newer space for older learners and you know, even the infrastructure space issue. This, I don't think this is as simple necessarily as adding classrooms, in my experience. I mean, is the gymnasium in its current state adequate for a school to get all the PE classes through there? Is the cafeteria space, is the music room, library, all of those things? So until we actually put this plan in motion and spend a little money to figure it out, we don't know what that number is. So that's where we kind of like a vote that authorizes and if you guys don't want us to actually start, we could wait until we could give that estimate. I don't know if Kim knows that or if she even reached out. I don't think anyone's reached out to anyone, because if this is not what we're doing, we don't want to do it. I mean, even though the paper's saying you're doing it tonight, I mean, I think the point is, if we're gonna put this plan forward to the community, it has to have some detail. The cost is only one piece of it. I think we have to let them know what it would be to the state of the art, like. We're just slapping a bunch of classrooms on there. I don't know that that's gonna sell in the community either. It's gotta really be. You know, something that people could be proud of and that we'd be proud of.
Yeah, and I would be happy to not wait. I think that with, you know, having Kim and knowing everything that Kim does, I have full trust that she's going to engage with the right people.
I mean, at this point, what are our choices, which is part of the discussion we had at our work session? What do we do going forward? We obviously cannot stay where we are. We need to make a decision. We've been trying to do that for a while. We've been cut into by COVID, which kind of put everything on hold. Otherwise, we probably would have had this decision made a while ago and be moving forward, but we weren't able to for various other reasons. So we're at a point, we need to research something. And we felt this was a very good plan, educational plan. There's several different reasons why we looked into this reconfiguration, besides being one of the best possible education delivery to our learners, because it consolidates all the district resources into 3 schools. It allows for all students in both communities to be together from kindergarten through 12th grade. It enhances the school community development because of the length of time the students are in each of the schools. It involves only 3 transitions for students. It provides for equal education opportunities in both communities. because students will attend school in Middlefield for 6 years, and then they will attend school in Durham for 7 years. And it allows for significant cost savings for the communities. And that's what we're researching, and that's why we are where we are. Is there any other?
Yeah, and I think back to
discussion?
your point, Jay, some of it would be work that we would have to hire. Some of it is work really that Kim would do, like in terms of modeling. You know, I think even Linda brought this up at the work session. Hypothetically, what happens to staffing levels under this consolidation, and where are there potential operational costs or savings in that? Again, in my experience, you have more on the savings side, because you're just becoming much more efficient by putting all those resources in one building. But we don't want to just say that anecdotally. We want to actually put that in front of you as part of, okay, yes, maybe the debt service goes up because we're borrowing for the expansion, but are there equivalent savings on the operational side by gaining those efficiencies? And does that make sense to people, you know, financially and educationally? I think that's the hardest thing with this decision is it's simultaneously an educational, we think, best practice for our setting, and also shows fiscal responsibility, but others may disagree. And I think we just like to be able to put that information out and see what people think.
I'm for moving forward with it. I mean, right now we're stuck with other options which have gone nowhere.
We're not doing anything.
We have a school that we're keeping open and cannot fund to fix because we were voted no on. I mean, we have got to do something different. And I think this is probably the best option. I was not very happy at first. I don't want to send my kid to middle school for 6 years. It's kind of a pain, but when you think about it, this is where I live in Durham. Having these kids together for such a long time is so much, it just makes more sense. And I think something that we're all forgetting is we're one track now. We're not ID or hot school, even though it says it on the John Lyman website still, which I don't know why. We are one program. We have got to just come together and move forward. Otherwise, I don't know where this district is going to end up in the next 10 years. This is how long it's been going on for. Like, you gotta.
So my question wasn't about total cost. I'm
No,
saying
no,
just
for the study.
cost on
The survey.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't know.
And that's what I'm saying. Like, I trust Kim.
Oh.
Yeah, I don't want to put words into her mouth, but I believe at the work session, she felt like the work that needed to be done could be handled at her existing planning lines in the current year budget.
Oh,
But she's not here, and so like, you know, you always rather hear that.
No, the way she outlined
Okay.
it, the way she outlined it made
Right.
it seem as though if we don't really do it right now, the things are lining up properly right now.
Our timeline gets farther and farther.
Right.
It'll be
yeah,
longer.
like I said, I watched most of the meeting. It's just I didn't hear what the cost for the studies and stuff would be.
I think we.
I think it's fair to
She did
say,
give us
if
a
it
timeline.
exceeds what Kim feels like the budget can handle, she wouldn't move forward without coming back to you all and saying, this is the impact, and I might have to move money from here to there, and are you guys okay with that? And yeah, but.
And the alternative is if we want to move forward or we need to move forward on something, it's going to cost us money no matter what reconfiguration we have. Even if it's one that was already existing, we have to go back and upgrade everything on it. So it's going to cost money. Then, so if we don't do that, then we just kind of have status quo and do nothing. And I believe the board isn't really in that place to do nothing. We really need to do something. The community needs something, and the students, the learners need something as well going forward. Any other?
I'll reiterate, during that tumultuous time where it was transition happening, maybe not. We heard over and over and over again, just make a decision. Don't keep going back and forth and being swayed. And, you know, I think we're all of sound mind that can make best decisions for our students.
Any further discussion? Okay, so those in favor of the vote to authorize the staff to gather information related to a potential school facility organization reconfiguration that would expand, renovate Memorial School to serve all learners in grades K-5, repurpose Brewster Elementary School, and close John Lyman Elementary School. All those in favor? Aye.
Maura,
Aye for Maura.
thanks, Maura.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, it has passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay, going forward with item number 10, because we've already voted for the appointment of Jason. Committee reports. Bob, did you want to report on the building committee?
Sure.
It was actually a good meeting.
Yeah, they're all good.
Bob or John, either
No.
one of you, you know,
Jump in.
the two of you.
I have a lot of notes.
Yes, I know.
There's memorial roof was completed. We should be getting the final as big documents well, it's supposed to be this week or next week, so they will be able to have the building committee would have to approve that it's not a state grant on. The memorial mechanics, there's a punch list of a few items left to go. Again, this is not a state grant issue, but it's under our bonding, so we would have to close it out and authorize it for our bonding. Again, the building committee would have to sign off on that. So those two things are basically completed. Just waiting. The pump house, we had a lot of discussion on the pump houses. As the water comes into the school system, then there's a fire suppression system that's separate. And it has a pump station that's buried in the ground outside the parking lot in front of the central office. It's a very deep proposal. We wanted to change the fire suppression system, so we are looking. There's a lot of discussion whether or not we should find space inside the building, then you don't have to worry about freezing or anything like that. But Jimmy Cotto doesn't feel that there's any. They are going to take a closer look at that, but they also want to look at whether or not they could build a pump house into the side hill, so there wouldn't be an elevated building, but you would be able to walk in from outside, so you have the confined space wouldn't be an issue. So that's being looked at. The other one was the culvert. As you see, it's mostly completed. You can drive over it. It won't be fully paved until the road is paved. I think there's some work on some of the side issues, and it looks like there's some stuff left to do on the side containments, things like that. But it is done. The paving of from Main Street to Allenbrook Culvert has started. They said it's a 3 to 4 week process. They will leave a one lane open for the buses to get in to go behind Corn School, so they don't have to compete with the drop off and pick up at on Main Street to Corn School. And the final is the paving of the roadway. There's a bunch of the engineers are arguing about the options, and we got 5 engineers and probably 5 different plans. And anyway, they're working with Jacobson and the designer of the base to come up with the final plan. So that I would think by our next meeting, we'll probably have an agreement on what that would be, and then we'd have to have a final design within a few weeks. Beyond the athletic field, the basically has finalized the RFP, and I think Kim is ready to go out with it if she hasn't gone out with it already. But the RFP would look at a design build of it, metal frame building on the outside and metal roof. So we did have a minor discussion on color, but I did, as I was looking at it at the football game the other night, I would think that we ought to have a challenge of a mural and have the kids paint athletic figures on the side of the wall. So we could have that as part of a challenge for one of these unified activities. But it would be, more pleasing than just the solid silver blue wall.
Yeah.
So that's everything that happened. They're working very fast, and we did. I think we're in.
It's a good group.
Yeah, good meeting.
It's a real
Yeah,
good group.
very good, good meeting, very driven.
And do I understand that we changed the date of the November meeting to
Yes.
accommodate the negotiation schedule, so.
Yeah,
It's gonna change.
November or something or other.
To November 9th.
It's gonna be on the night of our next board meeting, right? At 5?
Yes, just before, yep.
I'm
Yeah,
just letting
November
people
9th.
know that if you're on the building committee, that could be a long night for you.
That's why we have refreshments.
That's right.
I asked if you wanted a break, a second break. It's only gonna be 5 minutes. Okay, item number 11, we're coming down the home stretch. Communications, there haven't been a lot. I had an email from Joanna Schmidt regarding the student app for anonymous reporting, which was forwarded to the business manager and was reported on tonight by Ken. I had a email from Jim Martinelli regarding an article about historic increases in Connecticut school district per pupil spending. And the third one was from Stephen Liss regarding the district Latin program. Has anyone else received any other communication?
Yeah, I've got a couple. So, just today, I believe we all got it. Christine, who was here earlier, sent us an email about conferences. And the availability for possibly having evening. I have yet to do that, but I'll let them forward that, the administrators.
I think it was already forwarded to Doug. I
Well, then there we
never
go.
received it.
I received it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, I
that's right.
didn't know if we
Yeah.
were just on it.
No.
But it is something I do think we need to look at, availability for these parents that are
Working
working all day long. And then, we have we have one here, newly elected member to our, finance subcommittee, Jennifer Benson for Durham. And, Teresa Oplatz was reelected. So, welcome. It's here. She's been here through this whole meeting, so give her a lot of credit.
He's done her
Look
duty.
forward to you guys doing a lot of work this budget season. So. And that's all I have.
I had more communication on indigenous peoples, changing the name from Columbus Day or adding it to it. So that I had more communication than your letter back into it.
Right, yeah, I think I mentioned that the last communication. I mentioned it under communication and that we would revisit that when the district calendar is being developed, so we can make a decision at that time, because it was
Yeah,
already
that was
out.
the email response you sent out. to them.
Pardon?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I responded, yeah. Anyone else? Okay, going forward, public comment, anyone that is here that would like to speak? Anyone here? Okay, hearing none, do we have anyone on our online?
I see, I do see a hand up. No. So, Miss Georgette, hold on, let me see if I can. I think I might can. Not letting me click right now.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
There you are.
Oh,
Maybe I
yes.
clicked it.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Georgia Irachi from Durham, and I apologize. I just wanted to speak quickly in favor of unified sports, and I know that was an earlier topic, but I just got out of work, so I couldn't comment before. So I do want to talk in favor of it. I have one daughter in Brewster right now. She's in kindergarten this year, and she has attended Brewster since pre-K 3. She does have a physical disability. And I wanted to talk about the expansion of unified sports because it's definitely important to our family. And I just want to talk about how it's a great opportunity for us as adults and as a district to create real world experiences for our children at a young age to experience, and then to be exposed to the diversity of this ever-changing world. Not only is it important for our special needs students to be included, which is of course what I want and what's important to me, but it's good for all students. Since my daughter started school at Brewster, there's been a variety of different obstacles with accessibility and creating an inclusive environment for her. And, a simple nature walk takes a lot of planning and thought for it to occur because it's really hard to make things accessible for her. But what we need to see is that unified sports is good for all children and that it's good for adults as well. It changes our way of thinking about inclusion. And even though it is typically seen in the high school, and I know we're doing it now in some of the older grades, it's also important that we form these relationships at an early age and promote acceptance at an early age. It creates community and understanding. And then with having these unified sports and other inclusive programs, we're promoting these positive interactions between disabled kids and non-disabled kids. Having these unified sports and this expansion will lead to new relationships, improve self-esteem, and positive changes in attitudes for all students. So I hope that we can continue this discussion in the future. Thank you for letting me talk.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Okay. Hearing no one else, just before we got called for adjournment, I want to thank you all for an awesome meeting. I know we've been here for several hours, but we really have accomplished a lot. A lot has been put out on the table, and we will continue to do so together as a team. So thank you very much for being here and for all your input. So motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
I won't ask if anyone's opposed.
I'm gonna say. Hey. Yeah, exactly.